All right, welcome back to episode 81. We're going to call this one Quads and Falcons, or as an alternate, Quads. Huh, what is it good for? I'm here with my good friend, Brian Phillips, and we're going to talk about some things that we've been up to. He's got a history segment that he had all geared up for today. We were going to meet up with Joe, but Joe got called out on work at the last minute, so we're going to see how this goes with the two of us, and I hope you guys appreciate it and enjoy it. But he's going to talk about what the Fighting Falcons, right?
Yes, the F-16 Fighting Falcon.
Fantastic. So welcome, Brian, back to the podcast. I appreciate you putting together the history segment, and appreciate you being willing to talk about what we've been kind of both doing in the last couple of weeks, just sort of working on our quad skills. And we're not talking about four-wheelers like like off-roading, but we're talking about quadcopters, so we'll give that a little bit of talk. But I think, as we always do, I want to thank everybody who's tuned in and listened over the last 80 episodes. Holy cow, I can't believe it's been 80 episodes.
That's a lot of episodes.
Just really appreciate it, and we hope you continue to enjoy. Why don't we just, we usually talk about what we've been up to. Brian, last time we talked to was like a little bit before Flight Fest, I think, wasn't it?
It sure was. Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, you don't have to cover the whole ground, but by all means, give us some highlights, and I'll talk about what I've been up to in the last couple of weeks.
For sure.
You want to start us off?
I can do that. So I think a couple of the planes that I have that we had talked about a bit in the previous one was the first one was the Sea Duck à l'Orange.
À l'Orange.
The à l'Orange.
I love it.
So that one was getting a bit tired. So my son and I decided that we were going to give it a warrior's death in combat.
Nice.
At Flight Fest. So I gave my son the honor of doing that, and so I believe it was Friday evening combat. He went out there and he flew valiantly, but unfortunately the Sea Duck got split in half. There's a little bit of video of it on my YouTube, my small YouTube channel. If anybody wants to check it out.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a link to it.
But it was a good death for the Sea Duck. So in the next morning, I promptly went and bought a new Sea Duck speed build kit from the flight test store while we were still there at Flight Fest.
Right.
I did build it after we got home. I did build a new one. It's a little bit beefed up this time. I put larger than recommended motors in it.
Yeah, I was gonna say how did you beef it up? How did you strengthen it from last time?
So
because there's a lot of people who really love the Sea Duck.
Yeah, I'm one of them, right? I just no matter how many planes I get and no matter what I fly, I just always adore the Sea Duck platform. It's just such a fun aircraft.
Is that originally what is a Conwing L16?
I believe in the cartoon they called it the Conwing L19. But
L19.
My memory is terrible, but
that's pretty good. It
sounds about right.
No, it's not the L19.
L26 maybe?
No, it's L16. Man, I had 16. It good. Dang, it was good.
You're good.
Yeah, very look, good. Some days I got it. There's the rest of the time that I don't. Like, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But anyway, no. So yeah, in the cartoon of what was it? Tailspin. Which was kind of a spin-off of the Jungle Book kind of feel, and it was basically a bunch of people doing a bunch of air cargo?
Air cargo. It was
and the
a
dangers,
very weird thing.
Yeah, dangers and excitement of such, and of course everybody was kind of a bear or some sort of animalistic thing. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. It was part of my childhood, obviously, Brian. It was part of yours, and if you haven't seen it, I know my kids have seen it. Because I said, you should watch this. And they started watching it. Like, this is really good. I'm like, yeah. Welcome to my childhood.
Mine too. Mine loved it too. They had a blast watching it.
Yeah. I think it was originally they made it part of the U.S. Coast Guard. There's really beautiful scheme that they do with that. But yeah, anyway, so I guess my point is it struck because it's a lot of people, a lot of their childhood memories kind of come from watching that show for the couple of years that it was on. And so that when they made that a plane to build and fly, and it flies amazing, it's like, wow, this flies really good. Everybody's like, oh, you got to build one. Yeah. And so it's a favorite on a lot of people's list. So I guess my point is So what did you do to strengthen it for like, okay, built it the one time, it was good, it did this thing, these are the issues I had. Now I'm making a new one. What do I do, right? To make it better.
Yeah. So the original one that I had was just a basic flight test sea duck, and with a twin CPAC setup, which is a 2214,
Okay.
2216, something like that. I think it's 2214. Anyway, um, same thing everybody else runs from the flight test stuff. Um, that sea duck got a whole lot of abuse over the time. It got crashed several times and repaired. I think I went through 2 center fuselages on it. It was very much abused, and that's the reason why we retired it, because it was getting soft. The booms out to the tail were starting to flex a bit, and it was losing elevator authority and all kinds of stuff. So when I put this one together, the first thing I did is I really beefed up the main wing spar.
Sorry.
I I really beefed up the main wing spar. Put a large carbon tube in there.
Okay.
And just
What
kind of
size?
laid it in. I grabbed it off of my stack. It was
okay.
what I don't remember exactly what size it was, but it was just large enough to just nestle inside the foam spar.
Okay, so probably like 12 millimeter or something like that.
Actually, I think it's smaller than that. I think it's more like 10.
Okay.
Way overkill. Way
yeah,
overkill.
Yeah, honestly, you can get away with an air shaft and kind of nestle it in there with pieces of foam so
easily
it stays put.
You can even get away with some paint sticks sticking across there, a yardstick or something. So I did that, and as I was making the tail booms, I laid in some carbon rods that are probably 3 millimeter carbon rods, focusing on the top skin and the lower skin, just to give it some bending strength. The other thing I did was I went with larger motors. I went with it's flight tests XL size, which is their 22 or 28 14s.
Yeah. Those spin. What are they? Are you still putting like a 10-inch or 11-inch prop, but a little bit more aggressive, or are you?
I went with
sizing it up.
Yeah, I actually went down. I went with a 9. I think it's a 9x5x3. So in the original show, it was a 3-bladed prop. I really wanted a 3-bladed prop on it, even though I know it's not that great.
What? Don't blasphemy! Don't say such things.
Efficiency compared to a 2-bladed, you lose a little efficiency on that third blade. And I wanted a little more pitch on it because I wanted more static thrust. One of the things I like to do is drop stuff out of the back of the sea duck. On my original one, I had built a drawer system for dropping paratroopers. It was basically an upside down drawer with a parachute. You open the door on the back, parachute pulls the drawer out, and all the paratroopers fall out of the drawer. So I replicated that, and I maximized it to fit in the space, which I maybe over maximized it a little bit. We'll get to that in a minute. And the other thing I did is I put on the nose, the deck of the nose, I put a mount for a permanent mount for a camera for an Insta360 X3 in this case. So because I really wanted to get some cool footage with it.
You mean you didn't make like a mini cockpit and then kind of put it in the back of the cockpit and make? I mean,
stick it inside. I should have.
When I saw the way that's put together, I'm like, this needs a cockpit. This needs a cockpit and a little camera just behind Baloo's seat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like as if you were Kit looking over his shoulder out the front. Just saying.
Yeah, you can just pan the camera around.
Yep.
So
and have a pan left and right on that. It'd be perfect.
So as it was, it ended up with the if you look at a sea duck, it was right on the peak of the is a 3D printed mount with a camera thread, the quarter 20 post.
Yeah.
And it would sit right on the deck, right in front of basically the front windows of the plane.
That's a perfect spot for it, and it feels like you're in the cockpit flying.
Yeah, it made it really tough to balance the CG.
Really?
But yeah, but I got there. I had to add some weight to the tail to get it there. But
Okay.
it worked out. Um,
Yeah. I suppose. See, for me, I kind of had to push the batteries pretty much into the nose cone pretty far to be able to have that balance. So to me, adding a camera wasn't. You just move the battery back. But I guess if you're trying to keep a cargo bay empty,
it's
I guess it makes it difficult.
it was a heavy camera and it's pretty far out front.
You know what I
So it
didn't
made it
even
tough.
that has such a large capacity. I can only imagine, like with the motors you have on it, the amount of battery you can put on that thing would probably make it a really good. I don't know about good, but it'd be a really good long range platform.
I absolutely agreed. My original version, I would regularly fly it with a 4,000 4 cell.
Okay,
Um, and
yeah, easy.
it didn't even bat an eye. Like it was nothing. And I'd usually land after 10 15 minutes and still
Right.
have 3.85 and all the cells.
Yeah, I believe it.
Um, so
Cool.
yeah,
So
so I went
the
with.
Duck
Go
à
ahead.
l'orange lives again, or is it? Are we going to call it something different?
It has to be Duck Orange.
Okay.
The original long time ago, the original plan was okay. The next one will be proper tailspin colors and everything, but
Yeah.
Duck Orange is kind of taken on a life of its own. So
Yeah.
so I did all this beefing up. Got the camera mounted on it. I made a little spring-loaded latch catch for the hatch on top instead of having tape hanging off of it, and it came out really nice.
Okay.
First flight was absolutely beautiful. It had well, I mean, I was easily taken off with like quarter throttle. It had more power than it knew what to do with, which was exactly what I was going for.
So isn't that what
A-
everybody wants? You know.
Absolute blast. And I've got a fantastic video of that first flight because I had the camera mounted on the nose. It was a lot of fun. So then I brought it back in and decided to test out the paratrooper drop mechanism, and it apparently I pushed it in a little too far because when I went
Oh,
to drop it, the parachute kicked out the back of the plane, but the drawer stayed wedged up in the front in the nose,
right.
and the
Yeah.
parachute hanging out down below the elevator on the sea duct pitches the nose down, and just did not have enough altitude or time
Oh no.
to
To,
recover it. So it went nose in hard, very
oh
hard.
man. No.
Uh, yeah, destroyed the center fuselage. One of the motors completely separated the bell. The motor bell just popped right out. It ripped
Oh
the V
right.
clip
Yeah.
off the back. Yeah,
Yeah.
you and I were talking about it the other day when I was
Oh, no.
putting it back together.
I wasn't
Uh,
piecing together that was probably that was from the plane. Okay, got it.
so so that
Wow.
was really disappointing. But
Yeah.
I had the 360 camera mounted to the nose, and the the video I got from it was absolutely hilarious. By the way, sea ducks do bounce when they hit the ground. I can confirm that with evidence.
Ask him. He
Um,
knows.
yeah. So I'm still learning how to edit 360 video, and I haven't had
Okay.
much
Yeah.
time to apply to it. But once I do, that video will be available to watch as well. It's pretty funny.
Okay.
It's pretty funny. Yeah, it's all smashed up. So, as far as what I've been up to in the hobby lately, I finally got some time to sit down with it, and I've been working on repairing it. I've got a new lower fuselage made. Wasn't happy with the upper fuselage that I made, so I'm going to redo that.
Okay.
Um, uh, Part of it's because I'm moving the camera mount instead of on the deck. I'm moving it to the top of the fuselage, right at the wing spar, just to make balancing a little easier no matter what I have in the plane.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's mostly repaired other than that top deck and getting the camera mounted to the upper deck and then gluing the fuselage together and then seeing if it still works. So
Nice. Okay.
it will fly again. It's
Yeah. If the wing and tail booms And basically, the rear half of the plane more or less survived, which it sounds like it sort of did at expense.
That's all fixed, and I actually added
Yeah.
some additional carbon fiber strip to brace the tail where it
Okay.
cracked.
Okay.
So yeah,
But
it
yeah, so
should be.
it's a good flyer. It's pretty forgiving. So I
I
think you'll be
I love it, and my kids do too. Every it gets chuckles every time, especially
so
in the orange paint.
right. Have you flown it off of a puddle?
No, no, because I use the rear door.
Yeah.
I don't. I haven't tried to fly it off of water because the water would just come in under the door in the back. I'd have to
No,
seal that rear door for it to.
I'm just
I've
trying to
flown it off
think.
a wet. I've flown it off a wet grass.
Right. So how I'm trying to think. So you have the interior box sits and it gets pushed out, right? And then it basically dumps out whatever's in the box, right?
Yeah, it's literally an upside down drawer. So you flip the plane over,
Mm-hmm.
you pull the drawer out, you load it full of your little parachute guys from Amazon,
Right.
and
Push them
then
back in.
you just slide the drawer back in. The floor of the plane holds everything in. Then you flip the plane back over, you tuck the parachute up next to the box, and then you close the door on the parachute to hold it in. And
Mm.
so when you open the door with the servo, the parachute drops out, catches the slipstream, and it
Yeah,
pulls the
yeah,
drawer.
yeah, yeah.
Pulls the
No, that
drawer.
makes
Yep.
some sense. I'm mentally trying to figure out like how could you make that waterproof enough? Because again, you don't need a whole lot of depth. I mean, you really only need like an inch for it to sit in the water, right?
Right, right, right.
It's not like it's trying to fill up the whole darn cabin, but
You could
yeah,
you could raise up the lower deck and then just make the drawer thinner. But there's
yeah,
not a whole lot of there's
it's
not
probably
enough
not worth it.
depth
There's a lot more.
because of the battery. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
there's a lot more
battery tray.
joy out of dumping people out of the back than there is running off
Yeah.
of water. So
And the places I fly regularly, I don't really have much opportunity for flying off of water, so it's
okay,
not too big of a deal.
our field has some pretty long ruts. Um,
I
on the
know
drive
I
in.
see where this is going.
No. So I ended up building the Sea Angel,
Uh-huh.
and I was like, I don't have any water to fly it off. I'm like, I know our field way out the way has it's an old quarry.
Uh-huh.
So it has like a pond, which is super deep, but they're like, look, if it sinks, don't go get it. Like you're never gonna get it. But like if you want to fly off of that, you're welcome to go try it. But I'm like, and I looked around the one day it rained, and I'm like, our field gets wet like crazy, and I only need a couple inches, and I literally needed about a half an inch to be able to fly that off of the water. So I ended
Nice.
up actually flying off the water, amazing, and I landed it in the water barely, but it was awful to take off the ground, but it
That
was great to
describes most of my landings.
yeah, well,
Just barely.
just barely. Okay, so you rebuilt the Duck à l'Orange now twice.
Yeah, almost twice. I'm at about
Almost twice. You're almost there.
1.5 times right now.
So what else have you been up to? Because you've been up to more than just the Sea Duck. Because the Sea Duck is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So I got another sad story with a flight test design. Semi sad story with some redemption.
I think I know where it's coming. Go ahead.
So I brought to Flight Fest a Master Series Hornet, Super Hornet, one of John Overstreet's designs.
Mm-hmm.
Blue Angels livery. The intent was to fly with all with the Blue Angels crew that was flying at Flight Fest, which was really impressive. There's a ton of videos out there. Find some. It was really cool. There was 9 of these big 6-foot Hornets flying in pseudo formation as best people can do, line of sight, and it was really impressive. But I hadn't had an opportunity to maiden mine yet. Before Flight Fest, I just finished it and hadn't been able to get out to our local field. And I had an issue with the vertical stabilizer. Well, let me back up. Thursday morning, bright and early, Flight Fest just started. The first session out, guys are going to try to do it. I told everybody to go ahead and put theirs up, and then I'm going to put mine up last because it's the first try. So I throw mine up. It takes off great. It's got plenty of thrust for as light as the jet is. It's David Jester actually was kind enough to launch it for me,
Nice.
which was
Cool.
pretty cool. But as I made the second turn, as I'm coming around, I realized that I had not braced one of the vertical stabs enough for both of them, and one of them cocked to the side, and it kicked the rudder. It kind of locked the rudder hard over in one direction, and I kind of rolled over, and it spiraled in without control, and just obliterated the nose of the jet,
Yeah.
which was unfortunate.
Yeah, it was really a bummer to hear. Like, I'm sitting there, and I think it was the Bloody Baron build tent had just started, and I was kind of like looking at, oh look, they're starting the thing, and then I see you with rolling up with yours, walk up. I'm like, what? No. I'm like,
Yeah, it's all the nose is all smashed in. I ran into on my way. I was carrying it back to we were camping, so I had a RV. Um, uh, I was carrying it back to the RV, and I walked past John Overstreet, and the first thing he said to me, he's like, "That's a bummer, but reach out to me. I'll give you all the plans for the nose pieces, and you can cut them out and fix them." Really impressed with John. John's just such a great guy. I was, every time I've had a chance to chat with him, he's a good dude, and he's got some pretty solid jet designs too. I like him.
Yeah, they seem to be. I haven't had an opportunity to build any of his yet. I think
They're not
one or two.
They're not easy. I will definitely say that they're not easy, but they're very good.
Okay.
Unlike anything, you can always come up with your own improvements and your own preferences and stuff. So John emailed me the files for the nose, and as soon as I got home, I repaired it, got out, and got some flights in with it. And it's quickly becoming a favorite in my little fleet. It just flies so great. It's huge. It's almost 6 feet long. It's almost too big for my local field.
Yeah.
But and
how much space do you have at your local field, if you don't mind me asking?
Like
we've got an 800-foot runway by whatever, and then it's like surrounded by 40 acres of whatever's it's growing.
I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know the numbers. I'd have to check. It's relatively small.
Okay. Anyway, that's not a big deal. I just was wondering, kind of roughly, are you looking at like 10 acres, 5 acres? I mean, you don't need much more than a couple baseball fields to have a good time. So,
if I had to guess, I'd guess around 8. But I can find out.
Yeah, it's plenty.
But the Hornet flew beautifully. That's another one. I got some really cool video on that one. I mounted a camera on the back of it, and got some great video of it, and I'm trying to put some fun stuff like that on my YouTube, my little tiny YouTube channel. So that's there as well. A couple of flights with the Hornet. And then following that, and it will link into it. Lee from Windcatcher RC. Lee is local here to where I'm at. That's how we're friends through our local club.
Yeah.
And he's been very happy with how Windcatcher's been doing, and he wanted to kind of give back to our local club, because the club has really supported Windcatcher. So he took we have like a monthly open house, and usually like 20 people show up, and it's fun. It's a lot of fun. We have a blast, but it's usually pretty small and intimate. So Lee wanted to throw kind of a blowout, and we had several hundred people show up.
Whoa.
This time Lee had a DJ, catered food in. He got local businesses and a bunch of other and some other RC companies to donate raffle prizes. So he had a big raffle. And we had a lot of the local folks show up with different aircraft to demo. We had some large Healy demos. One of the guys, the president of our club, his name's Steve. Steve did a demo with I think it's a 650 size Healy, doing some 3D stuff, which was incredibly impressive. Another from another club, a local guy brought in a couple of other really beautiful scale helicopters, a couple of MD-500s, and then another one that I'm drawing a blank on what the name of it was, but absolutely gorgeous. We had Another local guy brought a very large scale. It was a Pilatus with
Okay, yeah, I've heard
a
of that.
an actual, but it was an actual turbine Pilatus, which was really
Mm-hmm.
cool to
Oh
see at
yeah,
our field. Yeah, it was really
yeah,
cool to see at our field.
nice.
And then I got to do a demo with the Hornet.
A demo of
Um,
the Hornet, hot stuff. Look at
yeah, a
you, Miss.
couple.
We're gonna call you Brian Demo Phillips.
Yeah, yeah, couple. Yeah, because I
Demo
break
man.
stuff. Because I break stuff.
No. So cool. How'd that go? So did
uh,
somebody come up and how did that work out? Like somebody run up and say, "Hey, man, would you? The Hornet looks great. Why don't you show it off? See
well,
what you can do with it."
so I've been part of the planning and all that stuff like that with Lee and some of the other guys in our club, from the beginning, and
Mm-hmm.
we're looking for guys to do, people to do demo flights and stuff like that to just kind of keep everybody excited a little bit. And I said, hey, I've got this Hornet. I'm okay. I'm not the best pilot in the world, but the jet looks really impressive. So so I offered it up, and they said, yeah, that would be really cool. And I think honestly, what I think sold it and what kept everybody kept everyone's attention was the DJ decided to put on Danger Zone, Highway to the Danger Zone while I was flying. So I had a little Top Gun accompaniment,
Yeah, sweet.
and it was really cool. It was
Nice.
really, really, really fun. And speaking of that whole day, we had an absolute blast. There's families there all day long. We had with the raffles. I picked up a whole bunch of raffle tickets and I let my boys put them into the different bags and stuff for the different
Yeah.
prizes. And
Yeah, cool.
we got some cool stuff. I got RA Cores had donated a little 3D profile plane.
Okay.
It's their Yak 55, and so I ended up with that one, which was
Oh,
pretty
neat.
cool.
Yeah.
Windcatcher went and bought they bought a bunch of Horizon planes,
Okay.
Horizon Hobby.
Yep.
Nice, like the expensive stuff.
Yeah, it's not the
And
cheapest,
gave
but
those
it's
and
decent.
gave those out, and through the raffle. It was really, really pretty cool. Some Flight Test
Yeah.
donated a few speed build kits.
Nice.
And we by the time I realized what my kids had done with all the raffle tickets, I started I started giving out some of the stuff that we were winning. So we ended up with one of the RV12
Oh,
speed build
nice.
kits, one of their new ones.
Yeah, I gotta
And
build it. Hey, when you start building yours, let me know, and then we can build it sort
so
of
I
together.
that would be a great idea. I already had one, and so the one we won at the raffle, there's a young man that comes to our field with his grandfather, and they've really gotten into it, and they've been enjoying building stuff together. And so
Nice.
my oldest Wesley, who you've met,
Yeah.
Wesley said let's
Hi,
give it to
Wesley.
Corey. Wesley said let's give it to Corey. So we gave
Okay.
it to this young man, and
Really cool.
with his promise that he builds it with his grandpa, and they come back out to the field with it. So
Yeah, that's awesome. That's exactly what those events are about. I'm so glad you guys were able to pull off like this really, and big thanks. My hat's off to Lee, putting his stick in the fire, as it were, and making that burn bright, because that's awesome. That sounds like you guys really got a lot of great exposure, as well as doing exactly what you want. I mean, you want to get the families out there. You want to get people multi-generational. It's like, I remember doing that. This was awesome. Hey, this is my young kid, like my grandson, my kid, my son, whatever, or daughter or granddaughter or whatever. Like, it's just, getting them back and interested in it, to know like, oh yeah, that's right, this was fun. And
absolutely.
for the public who doesn't know about it, because most of the fields are out in the middle of nowhere. Like, really, they're just stuck in a corner of the township. Like, don't go there. Like, those crazy people are there flying planes. Don't go near. Right? Like, no, it's like, no, come out. Like, this is fun. We need to have more people enjoy this hobby. It's harder than it looks, and it's a lot more fun, and it's absolutely worth it. So yeah, I'm proud of you guys for pulling off such a really cool event. It sounds like you got a lot of great turnout.
We did, and I really can't say nice things about Lee and Windcatcher
Yeah.
RC.
Lee's a stand-up guy.
Yeah, I mean the stuff he went through to get that all out there, it was just absolutely fantastic for our club. And you know, I consider him a friend. He is by far one of the nicest and most genuine people that I've ever met. So
yeah, well, he's I'm
I'll
gonna bully
go
him
out of my way to help him.
I think I'm gonna bully him to get on a podcast and talk to us a little bit.
He's,
No, he's doing the kind of thing that I think we need more of in the hobby, and I think there's a lot of it, but I don't think it always gets highlighted. And I think I want to have him kind of come on and talk about some of the things that he supports, just because he's like, I do this thing, I built this thing, and it does well. You know, whatever his business that makes all the money. You know, like, okay, this part does stuff for industry, and I make money doing it, but like, my passion is to support this hobby, because the hobby is kind of the reason why I started doing all this, and I want to support it and make it crazy. So he's always kind of in a hand, like, oh, I'm helping this guy do this ridiculous project, and he helped us out in part. You guys, you and he, helped us out with the big giant wonders and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, you know, it was awesome.
If you can get him on, I'll be really impressed if you can get him to come on. He absolutely loves helping, and he loves being in the background.
Yeah, I know he does.
He doesn't. And he doesn't want to be out in front usually. So
that's okay. Last time we talked, it was not a no way. It was yeah, no, that wouldn't be actually probably a bad idea. Maybe we could do that. But the conversation started with no, that's okay. You guys go ahead and have fun. No. You know. But yeah, so what else have you been up to? Anything else in the last couple weeks? I mean, it sounds like those will take up most of your time right there.
I have to be kind of I can't really say too much about it. Lee, with Lee, he and I have been working on some stuff in the background that's hopefully going to come to fruition between now and Flight Fest. Yeah. I don't want to say too much about it, which kind of sucks for people listening at the moment. Okay. But
no, you're working on a secret project.
If it works out, it's kind of a 3-stage project right now. If it works out, it's going to be some pretty cool stuff for. It's going to be cool to see, and there potentially could be kits available of some.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to hear that. I've heard hints and bibbles and bobbles of it, so I'm eager to see what ends up coming of it. Just like I'm almost as eager to talk, you know, about what we've been talking about on the forums about what we might be trying to pull off for Flight Fest next year. I don't know entirely what it's going to be, because we're still rolling through ideas, which are abound, reckless, and they certainly have my creative thought processes rolling fast.
The one thing I will say is I am a huge Blue Angels fan, as anybody who's seen my Hornet or my Ben Harbor Skyhawk, A4 Skyhawk knows. But there is a piece of Blue Angels history that does not get enough love, in my opinion. So okay. I'm gonna see what I can do.
Oh no, I think I know what you're talking about exactly, and I'm looking forward to. That's right, I remember we talked some about it. So I'm excited to see what comes of it, because I think it'll be fun. At very least, having a bunch of those kits rolling around, because they seem like they're going to be one of those things that you just pick up, put together in about 30 minutes total.
Hopefully,
go have fun with, right?
At least one of the options is it should be something fun and quick.
Yeah, matter of fact, what you're talking about, I saw at the last air show. I got to see it kind of do its thing. Yeah,
fantastic.
It was pretty cool.
I love it.
So yeah, if you were paying attention to what I talked about when I went to the air show, you might have a hint of what Brian might be doing. All right, that's enough of my podcast voice. All right,
and the last thing, and I think we'll come back around to it, so I won't say much. Okay. But the last thing, I've got a handful of quads, just like so many other people in the hobby do. Right. And if quads aren't your primary focus, they can be really daunting. A lot of crashes, a lot of broken parts, stuff like that. And I was
gonna say which part of it, because I mean, how are you tackling the quad thing? Are you building it from a kit? Are you buying a ready built, but with parts, understanding that I'm going to have to replace a lot
I've done a little bit of both, to be honest.
Okay.
I've done both. And I've got kind of, they're all relatively small. I've got a tiny whoop. I've got a little one a little bit bigger. It's a gremlin size, like a flight test gremlin. And then
is it a gremlin or?
It is a Guardian gremlin.
Okay.
Flight test Guardian gremlin.
Okay.
And then I've got a Flywoo.
Yep. Which one do you have?
It's a Flywoo Explorer.
Okay.
It's more of a cruiser. It's like a long range cruiser rather than doing anything super crazy with it.
Is that the one that's like 7-inch
speed
props?
No. It's nowhere near that big. It's
okay.
I think, the props are only like 3. I think they're 3-inch props.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I asked because I ended up buying one that's the long range 7-inch deal where you basically put one of those lithium ion battery 4-cell packs, and just run it at like 20%. And just go. And that's the reason why I installed the ELRS in the first place a couple weeks ago, because I want to get the 900 megahertz running so I could run the long range and just
run it really far.
Yeah, mostly because I want to, and then that's what we'll talk about is I want to use that quad to be able to find. I'm going to put a switcher and have a camera that points directly down, so that I can literally run back and forth across the field, and just find my damn plane when I lose it in beans or wherever it is.
Oh yeah,
like that's one of the missions that you have a quad for, right? So anyway, so you have the little Explorer, the Flywoo Explorer.
Yeah, it's a 4-inch now that I look at it again.
Okay.
It's a 4-inch, and it's the same idea. It's just the small one. This one is just barely sub 250 grams.
Oh, it is sub 250. Okay.
It is sub, even with a secondary camera on it. I have mine set up for a RunCam thumb. To run on there, but even with that.
What you've got that's the one you just put on the Duck à l'Orange, right? The thumb.
What do you think that's the Insta360 X3. That's the it's got lenses on both sides, for 360 view. These are the RunCam thumb is just a little teeny guy.
Okay.
It's got no battery in it.
Right.
So you gotta hook it up to the quad power supply or make a power supply for a fixed wing.
I almost bought that like 3 different times over the last week. What do you take of it compared to the Insta360? Which do you?
Very different animals. Very very different cameras.
Tell me about it a little bit.
The RunCam thumb. I wouldn't bother with the regular thumb. Unless it's in an application where you have a high risk of losing it. Because they're very inexpensive. They're decent camera image quality, but not amazing. The RunCam Thumb Pro, and I think it's HD, but it's not 4K. It's like 1080p, I think. The RunCam Thumb Pro has a better image quality, and it's 4K, or can be set to 4K.
Right.
It's the regular thumb has a round lens cover, and then the Thumb Pro is more of
it's like a rectangular. Yeah.
I would jump. It's a little more expensive. I would jump straight to the Thumb Pro.
Thumb Pro. Okay.
It's still under $100 usually when you can find it.
Yeah, I saw it anywhere between I think 70 to 100 depending on which coupons you could get.
Yeah, and I've been pretty happy with the Thumb Pro. I mean, if you look at any of the like any of my Hornet onboard footage, that's or any of my Noob Wonder, the Prandtl Wonder.
Okay.
Prandtl Noob. I forget what we named it. You know what I'm talking about?
No, absolutely. I mean,
and any of the onboard stuff from those has been with the Thumb Pro.
Okay.
Okay,
good to know.
So it's better. It's still not, it's not cinema quality or anything crazy like that, but it's very good for the price of the camera, and it's cheap enough that if you end up destroying it, that it's going to hurt a little, but it's not going to be the end of the world.
Right. It's not a $400 oh no. but
Exactly.
you know, and it will be like, oh, that was some money, but it won't be like, oh my God, I just lost $400 in a drink because
And
I wasn't paying attention.
and it and it's a beautiful option for quads, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Again, I'm no expert in
seems to
this
be.
area, but being able, because it doesn't have the onboard battery, it kind of fits the bill that everybody has been trying to do for years with the naked GoPros,
Right,
where they strip the case off and they
right,
strip the battery out and they do all that and they power it off the quad.
right,
It's kind of got all that built into it in a nice little form factor that's pretty good.
right.
Um,
It seems easy to kind of place in different ways easily, but you can power it. You power it from the board and that, or from
yeah,
whatever you have, which it's like, okay, cool. I didn't have to laden the craft down with another battery that
right.
I don't need. And that's another thing I don't want to have to remember to do. For me, it's like if I remember to I got 3 batteries for the craft I'm flying. When I plug that in, it powers all the things. I don't have to remember. Did I plug? Did I power the thumb up? And how about my little square cam? Did I remember to? Because there's a hat cam. I got the phone. The cell phone is a cell phone charged because I want to put the cell phone in there. Oh, don't forget the camera. I'm going to put at the end of the runway for the static shot. And then of course I got the quad. I want to put up in the air and do an aerial shot. Like, oh, for the love of Pete, how many batteries do I have to remember? You got to have at that point. You really need a checklist.
Yeah.
Did I charge all the things? And that's what a lot of people who say, like podcasters who do quad stuff, he goes, it's not just the quad stuff. Like, you got to remember the quad battery. Then you got to remember your local filming battery, whether that be a hat cam or a GoPro that you put on your body or whatever. You got to remember, did I charge that? But do I have a battery for my goggles? I got to make sure that battery's charged. And then, of course, if I do any kind of other secondary shot with a separate camera or a separate quad, all of those I need to remember. And as opposed to just taking a plane out and just flying.
Almost every layer of it is its own hobby unto itself. The video recording is one layer of itself. The FPV setups is a whole nother. That's all its own hobby on top of the flying. So you've got all these stacked, and it adds up. My hat's off to the guys that do it well. It's not easy. I think the Thumb Pro gives you about 85% of what you can get from a naked GoPro with significant more with a significantly simpler setup.
Okay.
You don't have to build your own. You don't have to go buy and destroy, half destroy, an expensive GoPro, or find one of the old ones that work a little bit better for the naked GoPro setup.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think
those
they
are
work pretty well.
They're all options. I mean, it's not, the idea is to get, decent quality footage that when you put it up, people are like, oh my God, this is garbage. I'm having a hard time looking at this,
Yeah.
And me, it's like, you look at my channel, it's like, oh, it's a hot mess. But I'm like, I'm more documenting what I'm doing. So I remember. And so when I go back to the build thing or whatever I'm doing, it's like, okay, that's right. I remember I forgot that a couple years ago I did this thing, and this is how it went. Like, okay, cool.
My channel is purely for my own entertainment.
Okay, cool. We did manage to get Joe. Joe called in. He's on his way back, but he's called in. I don't know, Brian. It sounded like you were kind of at the end of your thing. I figured we could switch to Joe, have him tell us about his past couple weeks here.
Yeah. Hey, Joe.
Hey, Brian. How's the audio, guys?
Yours is good. It's a little low, but I think it may be more on my end. Just you're good.
Well, hang on a second.
It sounds good. I think
it's good. It's good.
Yep, I'm maxed on that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell us what you've been up to, Joe.
Aside from getting called out in the evening to go fix a site that lost power and couldn't get their internet back up.
Well, yeah, we talked about that, but I mean, what about the hobby? Come on now.
Honestly, nothing in the hobby, because as we talked about last time, I'm tearing the man cave apart.
Well, what's the progress on that then?
Well, it's mostly empty. Everything's out of the man cave except for the last little bit of my computer desk. And I say
Okay.
the last little bit because I've tore the top half of it off, and I was working remote today, so I needed something to put a computer on.
Yeah.
But I'll get the rest of that pulled out, and then I'll be on yanking carpet out of there and scraping the popcorn off the ceiling and figuring out what color I want to paint the walls and all that.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean, that's an important step. I mean, I know I'm looking at kind of relocating where my workstation and my hobby room are, and I've got to do that kind of I'll call it the jigsaw puzzle or the Tetris maneuver, where it's like the house only holds so much stuff, and there's only so much room to keep things in the interim. It's not like you're just like, oh, I got this extra room, I'll just put everything there while I shuffle everything around. Like, no, it's never quite that simple, right? Like, it's like, well, I can, but I'm displacing all the functionality of this room in the meantime, so I kind of have to get to it. So,
And
Yeah.
in my area, I think I just need to clean and organize it.
yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah. It's all a project, and it all takes time.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. That's an important part of the hobby. I think and that's part of why I wanted to talk about it with you just briefly. Just because it's something I think we all should be doing at least once a year, if not twice, probably. At least organizing our space. And every once in a while, it's time to nope, we're doing an overhaul. Pull everything out. Let's think about how we want to reorganize it and get it where you want it and put it back. That's probably a once every couple of years thing, but it's important that it get done.
Yeah. So this will take me a little bit to do. I'm not putting a timeline on myself, not too long, because
your wife
my
is.
wife is yeah, my wife is patient, but the man cave has been relocated in piles to the living room. So that's only going to stand up for so long.
Yeah, it will. Especially we were talking earlier today that you have a new addition to the household. Not
Yes.
A puppy dog, which that isn't always the safest thing, to have a whole crudload of planes and an excited puppy.
Puppy teeth and styrofoam do not mix.
Well, she can't get anywhere the planes are right now.
Okay.
But no, so I ended up adopting a 4-year-old chocolate lab from my parents.
That's awesome.
That ended up putting the man cave progress back a bit, because I lost the 2 days in the process of getting all that taken care of. But
yeah,
she's good. We got the fence wire buried, so not running a physical fence, but a buried line, and she's got the collar to say, "Hey, you're getting close." And
how
she's
was that?
trained.
How was that putting that in? I've never really done it. It looked like it was. The guys who professionally do it run in with one of those little kind of like chainsaws or whatever the heck they are for the dirt. But I mean, it seems like you could really just take a shovel and just kind of run a line. It's not easy, but it's not hard either.
You can. So
what'd you guys do?
Well, we ended up doing up against the base of the house, because we only fenced off the backyard. So
yeah,
it's against the back edge of the house. And I was on call this past weekend, so I had to go and left my mother and Rachel to do a lot of that while I had to run out to a site. But they took it's like a hoe, but it's flat. It's that flat blade.
okay.
It's like, think a hoe, but it's not got the crook neck for the 90. It's just a flat blade on the end of the stick. And we just kind of pulled the dirt away from the base of the house, and you lay the wire down there. But getting into the grass and all, we were going to use like a flat shovel and just, punch down and spread the ground. But then we tossed around a couple ideas where I've got a bush whacker kind of attachment for my weed eater, and we ended up borrowing my sister's electric edger,
Okay.
And
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not unlike just a shallow ditch witch.
Yeah. And I mean, that's all you need. You don't need the thing like a meter underground or anything. You need it
you only need
pretty close to the surface.
a little bit.
You
Yeah,
just don't want the dog to dig it up. That's all.
Right. And so we well, you just don't want it coming up in rain at all too. But so they ended up running the edge around the yard, and then it was still kind of rough on fingers to clear out the grass and the dirt from that shallow trench it makes. So a mixture of that and that flat blade, Rachel would stab it down and then work it side to side real quick, and then it's only like 4 or 6 inches, but stab and work, and that opened the ground up where then they could just stuff the wire down in it and then walk back and tamp it, and it closed the ground back up. So I was gone for 2 hours and they got it pretty much around the whole backyard.
Cool.
It's
the best kind of install.
Yeah. Like it. I didn't say that.
No, you didn't.
But no, they did good. They got it done. And there were some areas where I got roots that, the top level skipping along the ground kind of roots from my neighbor's bush patch, tree grove nastiness that grows along the back of my line.
Oh yeah.
So the edger couldn't bust through those roots. So I gotta go back there and there's some exposed wire back there that I need to figure out how do I want to bust roots and try to get it underground, or just bring in a small load of dirt and build the ground up around that area.
All right.
But
nice.
Yeah, no, if you're wondering and you're thinking, it goes easy enough.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've got to redo my fence soon. And I think so when I do that, I'll probably put one in. And that way I can kind of stop my dog from digging under, because he'll dig. And then if it gets him before he gets to that fence to start digging, he'll hopefully it'll just kind of keep him. And that way he can just chill and enjoy the yard, as opposed to like, I don't know, whatever he's trying to do.
So something for you wouldn't necessarily have, because you have a fenced in backyard, you wouldn't necessarily have to bury it the whole way. Another option is just to run it along your fence, and then areas where you need to have swing gates and stuff there, you bury it. There.
Yeah.
Right. But the wire that they use is just got some thin plastic insulator on it. So you'll have to do like what I'm doing, where I have it crossing my driveway and then going up the side of my house. I've got it run through a crack in my driveway to let her have a little more room. And there's some caulk that I'll go out there and apply to hold it in place, but also protect it from the sun's light, because it'll cook that plastic and dry rot that insulator off.
Okay. Yeah. It's important. You gotta get the right stuff that'll hold up long enough. But obviously, if you're replacing,
if you were running along your fence, you would just then go back with caulking and cover it up to secure it, but also to protect it. And then you wouldn't have to fight trying to bury the whole thing, or you just bury it as you're running your new fence around, whatever you want to do.
Yeah, we'll have to figure it out when I get to that. I got other issues I got to deal with first. Slightly torn rotator cuff and a back that went out this weekend. No, that just recently happened. It's been fun. The rotator cuff's been kind of an issue, and I just been like, well, my arm doesn't feel right, and I'm like, this has been a while. It hasn't just sort of fixed. Sometimes you get a thing because you're old, and you're like that, and then like a week, you're like, oh, it's better. And there's other things that just don't get better for a while. So it's like, I better figure out what the heck this is. So I started looking into it a little bit more, and I think I have a rotator cuff that's been messed with, so I got to do something about it. But anyway, and I had one of those coughing fits, and I guess I was sitting in the wrong spot, and I felt a thwart, and my back went out, and I went, whoa. So that's been 2 days of kind of rehab, and I'm still kind of, twisting and strengthening my sciatic nerve and stretching out those muscles, and yeah.
It's a bit of a drive, but I know a good chiropractor.
I heard it might be worth it. No, there's a couple in the area that are good. It's on the mend.
For anyone listening that doesn't know, my wife is a chiropractor.
Oh, is she okay?
Yeah.
Who's that now?
His wife.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah. I need to have my neck adjusted.
Well, she'll just come right through the phone, and she'll take care of it for you. I heard.
There we go.
That would be quite a new way to practice if that was possible.
I know, right? Wouldn't that be pretty cool?
Well,
I got questions for her then one of these days about that guy who's on the YouTube, and he's got that weird table that,
Oh, if it's the one I think of, those tables are awesome. We have one in the house that she uses.
What?
Yeah.
They look like they're just almost like they look like they're not really doing much. They almost look like they're like they move around. I don't know how much they really do. They look like they're like, release it, makes a noise, and it helps you feel better.
So
I don't know how much it actually does. What does it do?
It basically provides a safe impact force. The thing you did when you were sitting in the chair to knock your back out, it does that in the opposite. It does that in a controlled and calculated way to knock things back in.
Okay.
And a good chiropractor will know how to get things to line back up. I mean, you'll get some chiropractors that'll claim that they can fix anything in the whole wide world and everything can be fixed. It's not true. It's
what I worry about.
There are a lot of things chiropractors can fix, and if it's caused by a pinched nerve in a joint, then
it's misaligned. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it sounds like that's what happened to your back because you felt it.
I went, and it was just it was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it was one of those ones where it hurts just as I'm about to get fully vertical.
Yeah.
Yep. Thankfully, it's not all the other spots. I've had it the other way, and that's the worst.
For me, having a rib knocked out of position is the most painful for me.
What?
I've never.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Is
that how
brutal.
you met her?
It's brutal. No, actually, another friend of mine was a chiropractor. A friend of mine's wife was a chiropractor, and I was having migraines that ultimately we discovered, and I started going to see her as a patient, and this is not long after I had graduated from college, and but it was because of a neck issue and a pinched nerve in my neck, and the only way I could stop these migraines is if I would get my neck adjusted. And we figured it out, and my wife saw that, and she had graduated her undergrad with a pre-med degree and saw how much the chiropractic was helping me deal with these migraines and other people that we knew. I wasn't the only one.
Right, yeah.
But she saw how much that helped, and that's what ultimately put her over the top in deciding to go get her doctor of chiropractic.
Nice.
So
that's cool.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, and a lot of people have an unrealistic view of it, which is unfortunate.
Well, yeah, I mean, just you hear good stories like, oh my God, this is amazing, and then you hear the opposite of that, which is, oh my God, I'm worse off for doing this thing, or I do this thing and it's not making anything better. I just have to keep going back to feel reasonable. And it's like, well, I don't think anybody really wants the I'm now reliant on a chiropractor to keep feeling good, So that's the thing that I hear then was, I don't know.
And I always temper that with it. You hear the same exact stories about the traditional, quote unquote, traditional medical practices as well. It happens in every business everywhere. You have some people that are good at what they're doing, and you have some people that are not, and you have some people that are just don't care about the people that they're helping or should be helping, and some that do. It's
right.
And it happens everywhere.
I gotcha. Nice. Well, I appreciate you covering that with me, because it makes me think I should probably go talk to my massage therapist folks that I go to who've helped me out of shoulder pain that has been like, oh my God. And I'm like, I know it's enough. I can feel it. I can't do anything about it, but it's right there. And they're like, dude, it's not there. It's all there.
Yeah.
And they're like, and with the back stuff, you should go see this chiropractor, because he's the one we trust. Like we do work with with him all the time. Yeah.
It's probably from all the hand launching of airplanes.
Dude, I almost threw my arm out trying to throw today. Anyway, we'll get into that right now, if you don't mind. Joe, is that it for you for a little while?
Yeah.
Did we cover?
Yeah, I just don't have a whole lot going on, and y'all go ahead. I'm here, but I'm on the drive home, so I'll just sit here and listen.
Yeah, I mean, you have your whole kind of zone, your hobby zone in flux. I don't know if you have like a plane that you've had ready and occasionally get out, but it's also been, I don't know about where you are, Joe, but it's been hot. I mean,
it has.
Whoa, man, that'll melt a person.
Yeah.
I mean, and around where we are, it's 100% humidity too. You know, like it's not just hot. It's like, like I can feel the like I'm walking through a chunk of moisture as I breathe in and out. I can feel it coming in and out because got that much in it. Ugh.
Oh, that's brutal.
It's bad. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I do still have the Edge that I could take out and fly, but I'm now in a project, and if I go and fly, then it's not getting the project done.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's that dichotomy there.
So, yeah, I don't think I'll be going to fly for a bit. And the next time I go flying, I also want to have, I've mentioned it before. I want to see if I can get like 3 fogies built so I can take the kids at the church flying. Because I had plans to take them flying throughout the summer, and that just didn't work out. So,
yeah, if you get them ready, I mean, the fall is a good time to kind of, because it's cool enough to enjoy the time outside, you know.
Yeah,
and that's a good time to have a plane ready. So, yeah, get your stuff. This is a pot calling kettle black, but get your stuff together, and then and then you can get those planes built. Because I'm with you. I'm going to build a couple fogies again because they're just really good trainers. I feel
like I need to do that too. Our my church has got a bunch of space out in the back area, right behind the church. Now we have a bunch of property, and I could be flying with a kid from our church.
Nice.
There you
go. Well, cool. No, it doesn't need a lot of room to fly.
Yeah.
I mean, you go ahead. I think I'm hitting some shoddy internet areas here.
Yeah, you hit a little bit of robot-y stuff, but we heard you. We got you. Cool. Well, then I'll go through mine real quick, and then we'll get into history. So I've been staring at Aero FPV's channel, who has now become Experimental Airlines. So if you haven't noticed, Ed from Experimental Airlines, who came up with, I'll call it the streamlined version of flight test kind of construction. It's just like a real simple version of it. I kind of had a variation. Anyway, it's always one of those things you're like, oh, that looks really good. And I've looked at that for 10 years and thought, I should build one of these things. And I finally decided I'm going to build one of these things. And it turns out what I've been doing with my construction, which is ironing the edges and stuff like that to kind of taper them. The only thing I haven't really done is I'll call it the facing tape trailing edge that he does. Basically has the underside is where you bevel. He puts tape along that, so it creates a full hinge that's reinforced, I guess, a little bit. And then the tape comes straight out the back edge. And then on the top edge, he puts another layer on top. And then so all that's left at the trailing edge are 2 pieces of tape that are taped together with the sticky side facing each other. So it's really, with enough of it, it's pretty solid. And if you've done your plane right, it's straight. And it's not some sort of wavy mess. Like it's really good. And so I built one using his method. And what he calls out for is basically he sands his, and sanding makes a mess. It just makes a mess. And I'm typically inside my house. And I don't really feel like pulling out my vacuum just to get a couple piles of dust. That I'm like, So I pull out the iron and just and take care of it. And then all of a sudden the edges are solid. When I put the glue down, it's against paper, that's against foam. Like I feel like it's a more solid connection. So I ended up making the second one like that. I like that one better. Either way, the construction method is interesting. The fuselage method, I'm not confident in. But it is quick and simple, and I do appreciate that. So I ended up building the Baby Ansley Peace Drone, which is a canard flyer. His goal there was to basically take this plane, fold it up, and put it in his luggage. And so carry-on luggage is like 22 inches long. He's like, well, this will be like 20 inches for the most part, with the exception of the motor. Take the prop off, and I can stuck it in my luggage, and away I go. Right, put the batteries in the transmitter in my carry-on, and then the other stuff in the thing, and I've got a plane I can bring anywhere, which is pretty cool. And Amy, I'm one of the things I wanted to get her in. If and it looks like it's an easy chill flyer. You just pull it out and you just throw it on and go and fly, and it flies for a while. So it would give her time to fly, and it would give her time to learn, and it would be gentle. But then you could break down to almost no space because she doesn't have a ton of space in her house. Or in her place. So yeah, I figured that would be a good one. If it works, then that was great. But so far, every time I've thrown it, it veers hard to the left and rolls. And I'm like, what in the world? It's a tube. It's a noob. There's no twist to it. I mean, it's a solid straight. We can look down it, and there's you can, if you wanted to, you can kind of line up the front and back edges. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, I built these things exactly the way I see in the videos. And I think I've got the motor set up where they're supposed to go. I even changed out the motor to something a little smaller, something with a little bit less torque. It's got a 5-inch prop on it instead of like a 10 by 4.5 or an 8x4.5. Like, I can't get that thing to get off the ground and stay flying straight. I thought I had it today, and then it was like gusting out of the field. Like in my yard, it was a little windy. I went out to the field. It was like there was a thunderstorm right next to us, and it was pulling all the wind. So yeah, I just don't understand what was going on. So after about another round of it, they talk about if there's like possibly putting a little bit of down, but then again, his motor is mounted high. So to pull it towards the center of gravity, that's a question Brian had asked, like, is there any thrust angle on it? And so if my motor is set up like a flight test, I literally took a flight test pod and kind of put it in and mounted it just like a flight test, but I made it as a pusher. So it's straight and level. Like, it's along with the drone top surface, which is right at the wing. It's like just below the wing. So, I mean, technically, I think there's a little mush, and I pulled it in a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of up thrust angle, but not by much at all. So I'd be surprised if that was it. I mean, it wasn't going up or down. Like, up or down, I could manage. It was veering left, like yawing wise, rolling a little. I was like, I didn't see any left or right. I tried to make sure that it had an even space along both sides. And the motor pod was, the motor mount was flush with the printed, with the firewall. So it was like this. It was straight and set. So, yeah, it didn't make any sense. So I'm thinking I'll either make a new, just make it, they're really quick. So I might just make a whole new one and see what goes. In the meantime, I've made the bigger one. So instead of making 20 inch, I figured to make the 30 inch and see if that goes. So I was putting together the last piece of that. I've got to pull the servos in and mount up the wings and put the motor on. But the motor this time I'm going to glue as a plywood piece, and I'm going to screw directly onto the back firewall. So that's going to be done a little differently than putting it in a power pod. So we'll see how that goes. So there'll be an update next time. As I mentioned earlier, I'm switching my hobby room and my office. So what I've ended up doing is basically occupying one of the spare bedrooms in my house, and almost always the dining room table, forever. I mean, it's just always been this way. And unfortunately, it just means that I've got like 2 or 3 rooms that are just like chock full of planes, which I don't mind. But, at the same point, like maybe the plane you walk into the house and see, hey, look, there's a whole giant pile of stuff and planes and building progress and all that stuff every time you walk into your house. Like maybe I should switch that. So my office is kind of more out of sight. It's something I could probably put a curtain over or in front of across like a doorway, so that way it's not always visible. But I wanted to keep it on the main floor because I think that's why I keep going to the dining room and not going upstairs, is because upstairs is where the kids are sleeping. I don't want to kind of, when I do that, I remove myself from what's going on during the day. And, if I'm building during the day, I kind of want to be wherever my kids are so I know what they're doing. And if they have somebody over, then I don't have to wonder what are they doing while I'm not watching. Like just trying to make sure everybody's doing what they need to and keep safe. So keeping it downstairs is probably going to help with that. I realized that during the day, I only need one large desk pretty much for what I need for my work. So I can put that in a spare bedroom very easily. So I think I'm going to flip-flop the rooms. I'm going to move my piano I've got a piano in the one room, and I'm going to move that into my dining area. So it kind of opens up some more of that space. And so really, I think what I'm going to have is I'm going to have a dining room that's going to be more traditional dining room. So when you walk into the house, it looks like a normal house, I guess, as it were. And then, of course, if you go around the door and look to the right, it'll be a plain central mess, which is going to be my favorite place to be. So working on flip-flopping that's not the easiest thing. Like I said, there's a lot of Tetris action that has to happen before that really finishes up. So, but in the meantime, other than putting the APDs and the Ansley Peace drones, Amy has helped me as part of that effort. I've weeded out probably about 10 or 15 planes that I realized like I'm not going to fly again. So I took out all the electronics. I took out all the servos. I mean, mostly it was just servos. I've destroyed those builds, and I'm like, well, this one's really easy. I'll rebuild this because what I have has warped and doesn't quite fly right anymore. So like I would want to rebuild it anyway. So I was like, all right, let's take all these down. And Amy's suggestion was, well, we'll just have a cat. We'll just hold the cat up, and whatever plane he touches is the next one. You say, that's the next plane I'm going to work on until it's finished. And we're going to give it a go. And it'll either work or it won't, or you enjoy it or fly it, or it'll crash and it'll burn. Who knows? But either way, it'll start helping you weed out the planes you've got on the list. She's like, what about this one? I'm like, well, that one needs like 2 motors and a thing. What about this one? I haven't finished putting the surfaces on, and it needs the little bubbles on the side. But now that I have all the systems, like I have it all. So I'm ready to do it whenever I can get to it. And she's like, well, how about now? And like, and I point to the place behind me. She's like, oh, yeah, you got to get through all that stuff first. I'm like, yeah. Anyway, so, but I do. So I pull out the Drachenflieger, which is, it's a 3-wing. If you look back in time, it is theoretically, it was going to be like the first plane ever to fly, period. And the guy who was Kress Drachenflieger, or Wilhelm Kress. Sorry, he was the guy who did that. So he had this design, and I guess he basically had it on 2 canoes, and he was trying to get it off the ground. And he might have been able to do it, but I think he didn't really understand that you need kind of a step on the water stuff and some other things. And honestly, based on what I'm seeing, I mean, maybe his models flew better than mine, but when I flew mine, the CG is at the very tip of the boat. It's like where it comes out of the water. That's where the CG is at. So if he's got the motors there, unless he's got people standing on the front of the boat, he was going to come up off the water and flip over. Like, you know what I mean? Uh-huh. So I'm curious to see. I'm going to mount my motors where he's got his. I'll do another glide test and kind of see where it glides. And again, I'm going to put 2 5-inch quadcopter motors. They're little ones, 1806s. So it's not going to put out a ton of thrust. I'm going to keep thrust low. I'll probably put wheels on the bottom of the canoes so that I can run across the runway, down the grass a little bit. And other than that, I'm going to just see how that goes. Because that was the last step. And I'm like, I was rummaging through a bunch of stuff the other day, a couple weeks ago. And I'm like, oh, look, a pair of 1806 motors. This is perfect. Here's a left. Here's a right. Awesome. Cool. We're going to put this over here. And so I've got a motor mount for it set up. And so I'm going to mount that up and get it solid and see what nonsense I can do with it. So that's kind of the next project. So I think that's what you're going to start seeing from me in the home build. If I'm going to be working at getting a couple stable builds that I can just put stuff on and enjoy and do more FPV stuff. And then I'm going to pull out like mothball stuff. Like, I've got the flying car, fix up the axles. That's all it was missing. Go fix up the axles. So I'll do stuff like that. You'll be hearing more of that stuff. Cool. Yeah. So that's, I
have one question.
Go ahead.
If the small Ainsley piece drone is for folding up and putting in your carry-on bag,
theoretically,
is the big one for folding up and putting into your check bag?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's bigger and it flies for longer. And I think he's like, I can get like 30 minutes or 40 minutes out of that. Because you can put a ton of batteries. Like, so the noob tube is like super long. He basically makes it 45 inches long or 50 inches long is the tube. And so what he does is he puts like 4 or 5 batteries in the fuse. And, the FPV stuff is way up at the front. He's got, most of the control stuff is near the back. And he just kind of has it hang out. And it's like, yeah, we can go for weeks. And that's part of what I liked about Aero FPV stuff. Is he really shows that, it doesn't take a whole lot to really make an efficient plane that you can fly for literally 10 miles, just fly for an hour and a half. He goes, I got like an hour. There's a little bit more time. I probably could have flown it for more, but I didn't, and they're not doing anything crazy. It's really is genuinely like 2 sheets of foam board wide. And it's like a 60-inch, wingspan with 1 piece of carbon fiber in the middle. And just basically a tail section.
Cool.
And you just kind of arrange the plane however you want. So as I get some of the, one of the other aspects is I tried to get a stabilizer working. I've got those control boards I bought for Flight Fest. So I'll probably start, if I get the APD working, I'll probably use that as a platform to get the flight controller on, getting HUD display stuff with the camera set up, getting a return to home and a GPS and stuff like that. So I can just kind of take it, put some extra batteries in it and send it for a while and just go and enjoy, whatever whatever that ends up being. So, yeah. But in the meantime, I think that brings us to the end of our, I'll call it the beginning segment. So now we're up to I'll call it the highlight of the day, but let's talk about the F-16 Falcon, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And that's what it's called, right? The Fighting Falcon?
That is the official name for it.
Okay.
But that's not what an awful lot of pilots and crew call it.
Yeah, the pilots always call their plane something different, don't they?
It was very nearly named the Viper.
Okay.
Originally, and there's a little bit of story there. I'll get to that in the history, but it's often referred to as the Viper, but the official name was the Fighting Falcon.
Oh, well, tell us about it.
So. Yeah, I don't think it's any secret. I absolutely love jets, and so that's why we keep getting here for. I keep coming in here for jets.
Well, no, that's excellent. Honestly, that's part. So I love the weird planes, right? Like whatever kind of weird thing you could be like, what in the world that flies? Like I'm in. I'm in. Let's do it. Yep. Let's see. Yep. Let's see if we can work. But like jets have always been awesome. They're definitely really cool when you watch them fly by at almost Mach 1, like wow, that's awesome. But they've never really, other than like having a model because it looks really awesome. Like I don't need to fly one. I don't feel excited like, oh, I got to see how that one flies. Like, so I'm excited to have somebody like you who kind of reaches out and says, hey, can I do another jet? Like I'd love to, because jets, I don't have that mental list in my head. Like, oh, there's the F-12 and the 16 and 18 and the 22 and the 23, and don't forget this one and this one and this one, and let's talk about the MiGs. You're like, oh, there's a whole other side of this animal. Like there's so many cool jets we should talk about, and I'm like, but they're all jets, and I'm like, and I know there are people balling up pieces of paper and throwing them at me right now. Like, like no, don't say that. And I know that there's some, and they all perform differently, and they all have had their role in history, and have made an impact with a lot of people, either because they know somebody who flew them, they flew them themselves, or they appreciate some of the technological solutions to the weird problems that reared their heads in war, right? Like during this conflict, this was an issue, and we were up against this, and this is how, the technology at the day solved the issues that were going on, which is pretty cool to follow. So let's learn about the F-16.
Yeah, and just another comment. One of the other Discord members, podcast listeners, Richard, Spitfire 76.
Two of them. He and Mike, right?
That's right. Mike was working on one too. They've been building Ben Harbor's YF-16 lately. And Richard flew his recently, and it prompted me to go and pull out some history on the F-16. Some of it I had. You were talking about it as a child, and a young adult. I was absolutely obsessed with the aircraft of the U.S. military. Jets in particular. So it became second nature to me for a while there. So right. I get a little excited about some of them. So most of them.
Awesome. Yeah. No, I'm with you. And so teach me, because assume I don't know. I mean, I do know some stuff because I've, there's a podcast called the Fighter Pilot Podcast, and he brings on fighter pilots who talk about the plane that they flew, and one of them
is that Hazard Lee's.
It is not. It's not Hazard.
Not Hazard.
Lee.
Okay.
What's his name? Aiello. He goes by Jello.
Okay.
No,
I haven't listened to his. There's also a Navy. There's also a Navy guy, backseater, has a YouTube channel. And of course now I'm drawing a blank on his name. He's a Tomcat backseater.
Yeah. Okay.
He has a fantastic history on a lot of Navy from the Navy side, which is really cool. But anyway, we're here to talk about F-16.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's hear it. So let's start with the basics. The F-16, it's a single, for anybody that hasn't seen one before or doesn't know anything about it. It's a single seat, single engine, multi-role fighter. It was originally built by a company called General Dynamics, which was split off in the mid-90s. General Dynamics still exists, but their aircraft stuff and manufacturing was sold to Lockheed, so now the F-16 is produced by Lockheed. The official name was the Fighting Falcon, as I mentioned before. But so many of the pilots and crew and fans of the F-16 call it the Viper. And even there was a version that the U.S. Navy bought and was using as an aggressor aircraft in the Naval Fighter Weapons School, which is the Top Gun school that everybody, that's what everybody called it, or at least used to. Anyway, the F-16N that they were using, I think, was officially called Viper for a while, as well.
Okay.
But the F-16 itself is incredibly prolific in the modern world. There's different versions of the F-16 being operated by at least 26 different countries around the world.
Yeah.
It's just under 50 feet long. It's almost 49 and a half feet long.
That's pretty big, isn't it?
For
pretty
a
long,
modern,
at least for a modern jet.
For a modern jet, no, actually. Like
Okay.
if you look at an F-15 or an F-14 Tomcat, which are the F-15 is still in service, Tomcat's been retired. Both of those are in the 64 foot range in length.
Okay.
So they're at least 10, 12, 13 feet longer.
Okay.
So which is not that's another 20% longer than the F-16.
Yeah.
And it's got go ahead.
Is this a plane that came after the Tomcat? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the Top Gun plane, the Tomcat, F-14 Tomcat. This is we'll call it predecessor, or not predecessor. It's a progeny of sorts. I mean, they were kind of developed almost at the same time, almost, weren't they?
No. This was the F-16 was a little bit it was kind of the next layer behind the Tomcat, and I'll get to that a little bit.
Okay,
a little bit further down in the history.
Go ahead.
But yeah, so the size wise, back to the size, the wingspan is a little over 30 feet. It's like 32 feet 8 inches.
Okay.
So it's like I said, it's not nearly as large as some of the other common 4th gen fighters, like the F-15 Eagle, the F-14 Tomcat.
Okay.
But it's lightweight. It's very lightweight, and it has excellent thrust to weight ratio, making it just incredibly agile. The turn rate is, the airframe is rated up to 9 Gs or more. It is very, very capable of very aggressive maneuvers. It's one of the most aggressive fighters out there as far as how hard it can turn as well.
Right.
Is
it mostly because the structure or the pilot load, or?
So there's a few things. The structure has to be strong enough to contain it, and it has to have enough thrust to weight ratio to sustain that turn. It takes a lot of power to turn that hard for any length of time. And ultimately the pilot has to be able to stay conscious during those turns.
What are you saying, that somebody has to be there?
Yeah, right. The guys,
yeah, the
pilot has to, and 9 Gs. At 9 Gs
will knock a person out pretty quick.
Without extensive training, no one will stay conscious under 9 Gs.
Okay.
Under the load of 9 Gs, it's just not possible without extensive training. And most of the pilots wear, with a few exceptions, most of them wear a G suit, which compresses the legs and keeps the blood from pooling down in the legs during these high G moves.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah, that's a whole thing we can go down. We're going to leave that rabbit hole where it is right now. So okay, go ahead.
So this agility, this extreme agility of the F-16, it made it the perfect choice for the Air Force, the United States Air Force demo team, the Thunderbirds. A lot of us know about who the Thunderbirds are.
Heck yeah.
We touched on them a little bit in the F4 history a few episodes back. And so in 1983, after a very terrible accident with the previous aircraft, the T-38 Talon, where they I believe the whole diamond, they made a mistake and the whole diamond went in. 4 aircraft went in at the same time. It was terrible. They took a year off. They regrouped. They came back with some brand new F-16s and a new team, and set about rebuilding it. And that was back in 1983 is when they started back in with the F-16. Okay. And they still fly it today. Granted, they've been through a few iterations of different upgrades in the F-16, but it's still basically the same it's basically the same airplane with a bunch of upgrades over the time. There's over, we're talking about them being prolific. There's over 4,500 F-16s out that have been built and out to different countries around the world.
Regarding modern jets, that's quite a bit. I mean, when you're looking at like World War II planes, like that's not that many. Because it's just an incredible amount of airplanes that were built and shipped around the world and all that, and lost. But yeah, I mean, to modern warfare and modern days, that's a lot of planes.
And for a 4th gen fighter, it is one of, I haven't checked the numbers for all of them, but it is, if it's not the most prolific 4th gen Western fighter, it's very close.
Yeah, if it isn't, it's pretty close. I'm looking at the Foxbat, which is the MiG-25, which is kind of one of its, in that era of kind of, this was its adversary.
Little earlier. That the Foxbat and the F-15 kind of.
It was
the
together. Phantom's adversary, but
yeah.
And that was a 70, almost 80 foot long jet. So yeah, I was way off. Okay, go ahead.
The Foxbat's huge. But that's a different episode.
It is a different episode. We'll talk about that some other day. If you want to hear about it, drop us a line. Let us know. You can reach us in our Discord or our emails at matt@aviationrcnoob.com or aviationrcnoob@gmail.com, or you can reach joe@aviationrcnoob.com. Go ahead.
Man.
And back to our regularly scheduled program.
But surprisingly, the F-16 is actually still in production. The latest variant, either Block 70 or Block 72. That's one of the ways they differentiate the different upgrade levels. Not just with the suffix on the end of the F-16.
Yeah, it's not just the A, B,
because
C, D, or whatever.
Because it's exported to so many countries, they do the block nomenclature. But it's still in production today. It's been moved to quite a while back they moved it. But it's still in production at Lockheed's facility in Greenville, South Carolina.
And it's still being used today too. That's the thing.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
everywhere.
In the current military operations. Well, it may not be, I'll call it the premier jet anymore. It's still being used, and it's really just a matter of like, well, if we can upgrade the radar a little bit better, it's still just as viable today as a fighter jet as it has been for the last 30 years.
Yeah, performance-wise, it's still up near the top. I mean, it's not the stealthiest jet out there, which is where we've really gone to. Ultimately, as from my understanding, the Air Force's plan is to replace all of the F-16s with the F-35. It's kind of the high-low mix where they have the F-15, and then as the air dominance fighter, and then the F-16 is the day fighter kind of thing. Okay. They're trying to continue that with the F-22 Raptor and the F-35, but budgets being what they are, it's going to take a long time to replace all these F-16s.
And that was one of the things. Being a single engine, its operational costs per flight are significantly lower than most other jets. Absolutely, which makes it an attractive option to keep around because, like, well, I mean, you could always have these as an intercept fighter. I mean, they're still a threat. They still work, and they're cheap to keep around. So why are we getting rid of those? Anyway, go. So let's hear more about it.
So just talking a little bit about what it looks like. We're on a podcast, not a visual medium, so I can't. It's hard to say, but there's kind of a classic outline for a fighter plane, and for most people, that outline is the F-16. Very classic. Almost any aviation fan is very familiar with that shape. It's the wings are a kind of a basic clipped triangle shape for the wings and for the tail, for that matter. And then it's got long leading edge extensions that blend the wing into the fuselage at the top. So it's a very long blended body. Out at the ends of the wings, there's rails for the ubiquitous, to use a fancy word. They're everywhere. AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles.
At the end of each of the wings,
That could be a whole nother show. Maybe we'll have Muttley come on and talk about missiles sometime.
I know, right? Yeah, talk about that and so get him to talk about some MiGs.
And I believe they can. I believe those rails are actually suitable for the newer AIM-120s as well.
I'm sure they could be retrofitted.
They attach right out on the wingtips.
Nice.
The canopy on the F-16 is a very prominent feature. It's just this massive bulbous canopy it dominates the entire forward fuselage. It's what they call
pilots. Go ahead. What?
It's what they call frameless. So it's just this massive bubble, and there's no frames on the canopy in front of the pilot. It's just
there's one
wide open
right behind them.
Yeah, wide open, unobstructed view. It's massive.
They said that one of the pilots on the podcast, the one who was talking about the craft that they flew in, he's like, it feels like you're basically sitting at the end of a Mach 2 pencil.
Yeah.
I
could totally see that. Yeah.
And he goes, that's pretty much what you're doing. You're at the very front of this little pencil and you can see everything because it gives a pretty much completely unobstructed view, except almost directly below you. And that's about it. Yeah. Everything else is pretty visible. So it's awesome. Go ahead. Yeah. He mentioned that it's one of the features he really likes about the aircraft.
And as big as that canopy is on the top of the fuselage, on the bottom, just as big and prominent is the intake, the single large intake for the bottom, on the bottom of the fuselage for the engine. It's just this big, massive kind of kidney bean shaped duct that tucks right up to the bottom of the fuselage. It's very cool. And then it's got, you can see if you look at the top on one of the leading edge extensions, you can see the port for the internal. It's got a 20 millimeter Gatling cannon, at the M61 Vulcan, which is in a lot of the American fighters. It's capable of 6,000 rounds a minute, which means that no matter how much you're carrying, it's going to be gone in a hurry. But the idea is that if you have another jet crossing you, he's going to be moving real fast, and you've only got a millisecond to get rounds into that enemy. And and the idea is if the cannon fires that fast, you've got a chance at getting a couple of hits on him instead of maybe one round from a regular machine gun kind of thing.
Okay.
And then on top of that, it can carry these days. It can carry just about anything in the Air Force arsenal on any of most of the 11 hard points that are under the wing, including ferrying tanks. It's got some of them are wet hard points where they can pull fuel from them.
Okay. Yeah.
And it carries a ton of stuff. We can check the numbers and the specs down below, but
it really looks like there's almost more junk hanging off the wings than there is, jet on some of these. You're like, oh my gosh, does that thing even fly? There's so much stuff under there.
It's really wild because and I'll get to it a little bit more in a second, but there's almost two modes with the F-16. One is where it's clean with nothing on it but a couple of missiles on the wingtip rails, and it's just this super hot rod. Yeah. And then you can also take that same exact jet and load up all kinds of stuff under the wings, and bombs, missiles, bombs, air to ground missiles, fuel tanks, whatever, and it's just like a super utility truck to do anything you need it to do.
Yeah, it seems like it.
It's pretty wild. One
of the things I heard is that the Vulcan cannons, they oftentimes don't like to have them on because they've had issues because the recoil from those guns is so massive that it really can cause problems with the stability of the aircraft. Because it basically slows it down so much when you're shooting it that you could really cause problems at low ground support. Which is why the A-10, because it was looking to replace the A-10 with the Vulcan cannons, but they ended up basically realizing that in the low ground support, you could get yourself in big trouble real quick with those, and they ended up keeping the A-10 because the A-10 was such a stable platform for that cannon for that mission, right? Like, so they kept it for longer. Yeah, otherwise this probably would have replaced the A-10 earlier.
There's a little bit there. The 20 millimeter cannon isn't really for air to ground. The 20 millimeter rounds.
Those are for the air to
ground. They won't penetrate modern tank armor. But the M61 and the GAU-8, which is the A-10's cannon, the 40 millimeter, the 40 millimeter. Well, 30 millimeter. It's 30 millimeter, but it uses a 40 millimeter casing. The GAU-8. The designs are almost identical. It's unfair to say that. Very similar design, very similar concepts. And the GAU-8 is scaled up for a round that will penetrate modern tank armor. So that and with the A-10, with the GAU-8, that's where they really have a problem because the recoil of the GAU-8 and an A-10 is roughly equal to the thrust of one of the A-10's engines. So it dramatically slows the jet down. Now they can't fire it sustained because you don't have that many rounds. The A-10 carries a lot, but like an F-16 for the M61, they only carry about 500 rounds on board. With a full load. So it's not quite the same. So now I want to shift gears a little bit to some of to set the stage for how the F-16 came about. So backing up, as the Vietnam War was continuing on through the late 60s, there was a gentleman by the name of John Boyd, Colonel John Boyd. He realized that what the Air Force was doing with big heavy fighters like the F-4 Phantom carrying just stacks of missiles was really not working well with the rules of engagement and dealing with these smaller, lighter fighters that the enemy had at the time. It just wasn't working very well. So he started started working on a few things. He pioneered what's known as the energy maneuverability theory, which is if you've heard the pilot sayings, speed is life, or if a pilot needs speed, altitude, needs 2 out of 3, speed, altitude, or brains. That's energy. That's where that all comes from, that energy maneuverability. It's you need to have high energy and have a highly maneuverable jet to win fights in the air.
Right.
So speed and altitude, that's where you get your energy from. And then he also was instrumental in popularizing something called the OODA loop, which is OODA is an acronym it's OODA. It stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And the concept is the person in any fight, whether it's in a jet or anything, the person or organization that can cycle through that OODA loop faster and go around that more frequently and faster will win every single time. So if you observe what's going on, if you orient yourself to understand, that's about understanding what's going on, then deciding what to do, and then actually doing. So observe, orient, decide, act. The faster you can process that loop over and over and over again, that'll win you fights. So Colonel Boyd kind of had a lot of people that were listening to his theories and the things he was putting out there, and that group of people within the Air Force and in Washington D.C. became known as the Fighter Mafia.
Okay.
So they were basically strongly pushing the concept of a highly maneuverable and efficient fighter with absolutely maximum available thrust to have the highest thrust to weight ratio possible.
Right.
So the first program that came out of that, from the Fighter Mafia and everything, was the first what we've come to be called as an air dominance fighter. Just untouchable in the sky, and that's the F-15 Eagle.
Right.
That's and that one's a different history. So we'll have to come back for the F-15 Eagle sometime.
We will. Like there's a whole list. I really need to make the list and start taking them off as we go, because we've talked about some, but we missed and glossed over so many other really good aircraft. F-15 Eagles one. So go ahead.
It's hard. So the F-15 is a brilliant jet. But the Air Force brass very quickly realized with how expensive it was that they could not afford enough of them to do what they needed to do, to get enough fighters, just to have enough quantity of fighters. So they started a new program. They initially called it F-XX, the FXX program, and it was all about the lightest weight, inexpensive, but high performance. So had lots of power, but it was ultra lightweight. Didn't have a whole lot to it. No air to ground, no nothing. It was a day fighter. No bad weather capability. None of that should be built into it. None at all.
It's the thing you say. We have a threat. Go out and get it and take it out.
Yeah, just
and come back.
Dirt simple, hot rod, air to air fighter only for close in knife fights, right?
Yep, pretty much, yeah.
So out of that program, there was 2 prototypes that came out from 2 different companies, General Dynamics and Northrop. One was the YF-16, which we're here to talk about today. The other one was the YF-17. The YF-17 was really cool, but the 16 won out for the things that the Air Force was looking for, because it was a little bit simpler, lighter. The YF-17, I think what killed it for the Air Force was that it was a twin engine design, but it also saved the YF-17, which I'll touch on in a second. So the Air Force selected the YF-16 to continue on, and they were going to go. plan to go to production with it. But the U.S. Navy was watching very closely, and they really liked the YF-17, and they really liked the concept, all these concepts that were coming in. But they, being based aboard ships, they wanted to have the extra reliability of having a second engine available. And so they followed up with Northrop afterwards to develop the YF-17 after the competition into a carrier-capable jet. And that became what we know as the FA-18.
Right.
But that's also different.
That is a whole different.
That's a whole different history.
Yeah.
So the YF-16, there was some really cool stuff. We've touched on a couple of them. They had some new features, particularly in the cockpit area, that were really wild. They focused on giving the pilot an advantage. We talked about that canopy. That canopy was huge. If you can't find your adversary in a dogfight, you can't beat them. So having that massive unobstructed view was incredibly important.
Yeah, I think the pilot on the podcast mentioned the thing you lose by not having that, I'll call it forward rim in the cockpit glass, is you don't get the rear view mirror. And he goes, yeah, that's not that big. I mean, it's nice, but I mean, the unobstructed view is so much better.
It's not often you're going to have somebody pulling up behind you, flashing their lights to pass you, right?
Well, no, but I mean, if you're looking for an adversary and trying to figure out, are they behind me or ahead of you? I guess when you're in the aircraft, it's really tough to kind of look behind you. So, without having to do a bunch of maneuvering, the rear view mirror does help. But I can imagine it's not easy to pinpoint the very small
where you're
that is
looking.
So
and you still,
I imagine it's marginally helpful at that point.
Yeah, and you're still gonna have to turn around and look over your shoulder to try to figure out where he's at. The next big one, and this was a massive one that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's massive. Is this they took the ejection seat and they very steeply reclined it. So the pilot's laying back almost. It's at a 30 degree,
a lazy boy.
At a 30-degree angle. And the reason that's so important is because it makes a very big difference in how the blood moves in the body as you're pulling high G's.
Right. It's not pulling straight to your legs, it's pulling to your back and your butt, more or less, as opposed to going straight to your legs, which that means you're conscious.
That means it's easier to stay conscious. Not easy, but easy. a little easier. And it makes a very, very big difference in even in highly trained, highly fit pilots who are pulling 9 Gs on a regular basis. It gives them a fighting chance to stay awake.
Right. As well as supports their body better too. I mean, you got to imagine that weight has got to be, it's being borne by your body structure for the most part. But if you're 30%, part of that is being supported by the chair, right? It's being supported by the seat. And not just, your head becomes if it's an 8-pound head, 9 Gs, that's a 72-pound rock sitting
8
atop.
times 9, yeah.
Yeah, you're in trouble. That becomes really heavy really quick. And
Absolutely.
if at 30%, that's, hold on, let me forget my trick. I got a portion of that. Anyway, so let's just say 30% of that. And I know that's absolutely wrong. My brain is not doing the math right. But let's say 30% of that is borne by the seat. Now, all of a sudden, you've got a 50-pound head.
Yep. and it doesn't all go, and when the seat is upright, all of that load goes right through your spine and compresses the spine. And I've never checked medical history, but I've always understood that some of the more traditional pilots often would have significant back problems with compression of discs and things like that. And I have to believe that that's mitigated some by that seat.
So by the fact that they get to fly fighter jets, and they're like, I don't care. I get to fly a fighter jet. I guess that's the price I gotta pay.
I don't care if I gotta walk hunched over when I'm old.
Exactly
Um,
right.
and then the last thing though was equally big, and this one seems as big. This is the fly-by-wire system.
Right.
This is one of the first jets that there was not hydraulic or mechanical linkages all the way out to every control surface. This was all completely done electronically. Much like our seaplanes, right? There's no
It's all
mechanical link everywhere. So it was fully fly-by-wire, and along with that, one of the novel things that they did, and I don't know of any other jet that's done this after, but they put the primary control stick, instead of between the pilot's knees where they it's sitting right in front of them, they put it on the side. They put it on the right side of the console, so the pilot just has his arm resting on the console. And they had some early teething issues with it, and it actually led to they had to figure out what the force needed to be like and how much movement it needed to have. I think early on it was actually force only, and they didn't even let the stick move. And it led to, along with a few other things, it led to an accidental first flight during a high-speed taxi test. They got into they were doing a high-speed taxi test with the YF-16 before they had ever done a flight, and the test pilot got into a little bit of a weird oscillation that he couldn't correct because he couldn't get the force right on the stick. And ultimately, in order to stop it, and ultimately he decided to pull back on the stick and get the aircraft airborne, instead of letting it oscillate until it tripoded over into the grass and broke it. So there's this, instead of flight number 1, they call it flight number 0. So there's this weird flight number 0 before the official first flight of the YF-16 that's out there, which is pretty cool.
Pretty rare.
Yes. So those are all really key pieces and that are part of the puzzle that becomes I'll say, legendary agility of the F-16. It's very highly regarded among fighter pilots, as you've mentioned from the Fighter Pilot podcast.
And honestly, if you want to get like a first-person perspective on just being a fighter pilot and what they kind of go through and the first-hand experience, I can't recommend that podcast. I want to say thanks to Richard. I think turned me on to that a long while ago, and it's really a good, like, pick your favorite jet and listen to a couple fighter pilots. Some have flown in it, some have not. The Vincent Aiello is his what handles Jello. He's the one who's talking to he's a podcast host, and he talks to his different buddies, and he always has somebody on who's flown that jet, whatever it is. And it's really neat to hear their first person, recollections of it and their experiences. And they were like, oh, well, it's like this and like this. And you're like, wow. And then when they describe sometimes about like how the different craft fly, and you're like, I've flown that. I've flown an F-22 because I've made a model of it, and it sort of, maybe it doesn't fly. I wonder if it flies like, and the way he's describing it, like, that's exactly how I would describe how the RC flies. Like, that's great, and it's pretty cool. So one of the things they talk about a lot in the different things, as I've listened to the F-22 and the F-35 episode and a couple other, like the Tomcat episode, a couple other ones, they talk about, and some of even the Phantom one, way back when things were the earlier ages of the jet, they talk about how the different generations, by alleviating the pilot load of flying the aircraft, you enable the pilot to focus less on how do you get there and physically doing the things to do it, and focus more on where's my enemy, how do I coordinate what I've got to get that enemy out of the way.
Right back to John Boyd's OODA loop concept.
Exactly.
Let's them process the OODA loop faster.
Exactly. And so by alleviating those loads, the fly-by-wire, by not having to pull on the stick and move the servo. I mean, and I remember one of the things that pilots were concerned about, and I think it was quickly alleviated because that loop shortens and it becomes an asset and is that they don't get the feedback, right? The concern is that in a failure situation, they're not going to be able to do it. It's like, well, in a failure situation, you're kind of hosed anyway. Like, but you don't get the feedback from the plane. Like, you're not getting that, oh, this is harder. Some things, there's more turbulence, there's more something. Like, I can't feel what's happening to the plane through the stick, because you do. But it's offset by the gains you get in fighter load release. You don't have to worry about all this. You don't have to pull on the thing. Like, oh, this is a hard turn to make. Like in the 9G turn, pulling on that stick is going to be hard. Well, not really. Not when you're just doing the thing and the hydraulics do the thing and then off you go. You know, nowadays you just say, I want to go over there to get that craft. It's like, okay, see you there.
Yeah,
and you have
absolutely.
to worry about like, hey, I'm gonna get these 3 drones to go over there. I'm gonna get this guy. I'm gonna coordinate my ground source to laser tag it. I'm gonna, you're doing that's the difference between the generations.
You're focusing on the fighting rather than the flying.
Exactly, and the plane does most of the flying, and in a pinch you do the flying if you have to, is what it seems to be. But so this is one of the first advances in that release of pilot load to focus more on flying. So or on fighting and on the mission at hand really is what it is.
And that's
pretty cool.
That was one of the huge aspects of that fly-by-wire system that brought that in. They could tune that in so that the plane would fly itself, and it would go where the pilot was telling it to go.
Right.
Rather than the pilot having to do all the nuances of figuring out the dynamics of it. It just went where it wanted to.
Definitely. Very cool.
But so something interesting happened to the F-16 over its lifespan, though. Over this long lifespan, right? Its first flight was in the late 70s.
Right.
And here we are in 2023.
Right. 50
and it's
years.
It's still an extremely viable aircraft. I mentioned it was designed as this ultra lightweight, high performance, super inexpensive, daytime, good weather only fighter. Now, just because the basics of the design of the jet was so good, people started realizing, hey, if we just upgraded this little part of the electronics in the plane, or if we put an extra hard point on it where we could mount stuff to, we could start adapting it to other roles. And it just snowballed, and it snowballed, and it snowballed, and it snowballed. So now it's, relatively speaking, it's cheaper than the F-15s, it's cheaper than the Raptors, it's cheaper than the F-35s, but the price has crept up quite a bit, not just because of inflation, but
because what the upgrades that needed to happen to keep it current.
Well, not just to keep it current in the current role of this lightweight fighter, but it has expanded to almost every role that the Air Force has.
Wow, nice.
All the avionics have been upgraded. They not just air-to-air combat, but there's air support on the ground. Air support of ground troops.
Mm-hmm.
Bombing. Air-to-ground strikes, which is a completely different thing. Reconnaissance with a number of different reconnaissance pod. Electronic warfare with all sorts of jamming pods that the F-16 can carry now. Suppression of air defenses. I think in the F-4 episode, we talked about the wild weasel role. Suppression of air defenses. That's one of the modern ways they describe that wild weasel role, where you go out hunting SAM sites and wait till they. I don't know what the current techniques are, but basically wait till you find them and then
you whack them. Yeah, you activate it and you whack them all.
hit them from a distance. So the F-16 went from this plane where it was supposed to be nothing but a dogfighter, but the reason that for its longevity is that it's been incredibly adaptable, because the airframe is just a very brilliant basic. The basic structure of it is well suited to all sorts of things. It just kind of goes to show that if you have a good solid design from the outset, it can be adapted to so many things. We see that with the F-4 Phantom we talked before, the F-15 Eagle, the F-14 Tomcat, the F-18 Hornet. All these jets from that same time period have seen their going from a very focused role to being extremely capable in most roles, just because of the excellent design. And if it weren't for the high cost, we would see that with the F-22 as well. But we certainly will see it with the F-35. but they had the F-35 is slated to replace most of the F-16s eventually.
Yeah, and they're also designed with modularity in mind.
Yeah.
Which is not what none of these aircraft, these were purpose built.
Yeah.
And they weren't designed to be like, oh, just pull this out and put this new thing in and you're up and running. It's like, well, no, it's in there. Sorry.
They were actually they were designed for the modularity. That was one of the great things about it. They didn't plan to change it out for different things. They planned it for serviceability, where the electronics were on in boxes that plugged in that they could just pull out and unplug them and take them out of the jet and swap a new one in if something went bad. Well, come to find out, hey, we can add all this electronic capability to this. We can fit it in this box. Hey, this box goes right in where the old one used to go, and we could add this capability.
Couple connectors.
Yeah.
So it ended up being more modular than they planned on, I guess.
They just intended it from a serviceability standpoint in the beginning, but it ended up being
it's funny because
incredibly brilliant for its long-term viability.
You look at a lot of the World War II planes that were light and had more longevity than others, and most of those had to do with serviceability. The planes that were designed with, hey, how do we get this parts and pieces of it fixed and put back in the air, were the ones that kept around longer.
Completely agree.
And that's I think that's what you realize as you look at different planes throughout World War II, and as World War II evolved, the later the aircraft, the more likely there was a focus. And when you look at, like, I'm trying to think of what some of the aircraft were that I remember reading histories about, but like the focus on modularity for serviceability. Like, hey, there were parts that you just pulled out and put it in the new thing. The gear clipped and pulled out and put on a new. Like, these parts are going to break because they're going to happen, because this is when things go wrong. They go wrong this way and this way and this way. So we're going to make sure that those things are easy to replace. That there are ways to access pieces of the engine, because these are the parts that tend to wear and tend to fail. So when you build that into the plane, those are the planes that ends up keeping around, that they keep the same engine for these things, for like these 4 planes, because if you've got a fleet of these 4 different types that they do all these different things, all you got to do is keep these parts around and you'll be able to fix any of them. It's like, oh, absolutely. That's awesome. This is what we want, and not that that's hard to grasp, right? But it seemed like that need and desire came to the forefront as the war moved on, right? And as the needs of the military progressed, right? And obviously it continues today. So, well, see if you can tell some, were there any more, like, I know that these things always go through a million variants, and you could probably spend a whole podcast on just the variants, but I know this one had some pretty interesting one or two here.
I have one that I want to touch on.
Okay, tell us about it.
So the F-16 didn't have a ton of really unique variants that that really stand out,
right?
Except for one, and it's a favorite of mine, for I'm not sure why, but in 1980, which was still really early on, they took a couple of within the first 10 F-16 airframes that were in production. They took them and they created a variant they called the F-16 XL. And it was unique in that it was a full delta wing, and it was a cranked arrow style. So it would have, a narrower angle in the front end of the wing, and then it would widen out in the back. If you're familiar with the Saab Draken, that's it's very similar in style to that, with how that wing was shaped. But it's a full delta wing and didn't have a tail. And they added another 4 feet to the center fuselage, so it was roughly 4 feet longer overall as well. They built 2 of them, and they were playing around with it, and that was some of the early original talks about doing an air-to-ground version of the F-16 back when the base plane was still being considered just a lightweight day fighter. Those planes were used for all kinds of stuff. The Air Force flew them, the 2 planes, even though that part of the program didn't continue. They continue to fly those 2 examples, first with the USAF and then NASA took them over, and they continued flying them until 99. So for almost 20 years, they flew these two jets, gathering data the whole time, learning stuff, making modifications, and learning stuff about the base F-16s and about newer designs coming, that even stuff that we haven't seen yet, and as the general public. And it's really fascinating. And NASA has a really cool, it's a PDF book, and they call it Elegance in Flight. That really goes through the history. Anybody who's interested in the F-16XL should really go read that PDF, and it'll be in the show notes. There'll be a link to it.
We'll have a link
for NASA's site. I encourage anybody who's an F-16XL fan who loves that particular version, and I know there's a lot of people out there that are. Highly recommend go check that out, because it's a great. It's very technical, but there's some good history there. Some really cool pictures that you don't really see anywhere else out on the web, and it's a fun read.
Was the point? I'm not that I wasn't listening. I was listening. Just I'm looking at the, there's like two variants. There's like the modified leading edge, we'll call it, and then there's like a glove that went around it, and then of course they showed where they stuck a ton of instruments on the leading edge to understand, I guess. So hypersonic and supersonic flight, right?
Yeah. So they used it for all kinds of different experiments, and so there's a photo that I added to the show notes that that you're referring to. That
I've added a couple more too.
And I'm not sure exactly what this is one of the NASA era photos, so I'm not sure exactly what they were testing in this case. But they did all kinds of different stuff. But the pure point, the original point of doing it was to give it a much lighter wing loading, or much more wing area, so that it could carry significantly more weight.
Okay.
For carrying air to ground stores, they figured that it needed that to be able to do that. And they found all kinds of different advantages to it, in addition to just having lighter loading.
If it didn't hold enough munitions already, let's add another 2 or 3 rows is what it looks like you can add by doing this.
But that's the thing, is that at the time it didn't. When they first developed these, it was still strictly the day only fighter. Like, the primary role of the F-16 was to go out in a clean configuration,
couple sidewinders,
with a couple of sidewinders, a fully loaded cannon, and that's it. Maybe a Sparrow, or the AIM-120 later,
right?
The medium range missile, maybe a pair of those under the wings, and that's it. That's all they planned for at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so this was their first foray into it. And then after they did this, they realized they didn't really have to go this far and make a very dedicated variant to do it. But this is what got us to what we see now in the F-16, with with the massive load carrying capability that it does have.
Or at least what it looks like it has. Just look.
It's there.
That's a lot of hard points in there.
I want to.
Cool.
I want to say that the max takeoff weight is almost double the empty weight. No, it's more than double. So the empty weight is just under 1,900 pounds. Or excuse me, 19,000 pounds. 19,000 pounds is the empty weight. And the max takeoff weight is just over 42,000 pounds.
Right.
So that's a big difference.
That's double. It's weight and payload, basically.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's just since we're talking about some of that stuff, the engines.
Yes.
There's 2 different engines that were used mostly, or 2 primary engine families: the GE F-110 and then the Pratt & Whitney F-100. And I think they switched to the F-100 later. It's got a little bit more thrust, and I think it's a little bit more flexible than the original F-110s. But both variants of those, I believe, were also both of those engine families were also used in the F-15, and then the F-110 was also used. A variant of that was also used in the F-14 Tomcat for the D models. I think the B models and the D models got the F-110, which was much better than the original in the Top Gun. I'm jumping all over the place.
No, that's all right. I'm
so
looking
many. It's all tied together. It's all.
I know the wiki has this list of munitions that it is capable of carrying, and we would be here for another podcast just going over.
It's a huge list.
It's a massive list of possibilities. It basically
stuff you never even heard of too. You ever heard of a Penguin anti-ship missile? I haven't heard of that.
I have, but that's only because I played a couple sim games way back in the day.
Fair enough.
But other than that, no, I would never have heard about the Penguin and a couple other. Yeah. Anyway, so it's incredibly versatile. Go look up the information you're looking to. Like it went up to, what was it, Mach 2.05, I think is the max speed.
Just over Mach 2, and they very rarely go that fast.
Yeah, that really. Most of the time it was what Mach 1.2 or so.
Right? Cruising under like Mach 1.5. It's a dramatic difference in the amount of fuel consumed
usually.
And the other side of it that nobody ever talks about is when you take fighter jets, modern jets, up to their top, their Vmax, there's usually limited structurally, and like skin heating, and I've heard many pilots say that, and particularly the faster ones, the F-15s, the F-14s, and stuff like that, if you take it out to Vmax, the jet is usually never the same again.
Okay. Yeah. When you bring it up to its limits, it's gonna mess it up.
You're burning paint off of stuff. You're tweaking pieces and it's it requires significant amount just to clean it up after you do that. It requires many hours of maintenance by the ground crew to do it. So they try to back it off, and they found that. I mean, you'll notice that the more modern jets, the F-35s and even the F-22, for example, they focus on getting up to speed with less fuel. They focus on they don't usually shoot for anything over Mach 1.6 anymore, just because they don't feel like they need to go any faster than that.
Right. If they're not, I mean, there's a couple of them that are capable of super cruise, which is basically their cruise speed is above Mach 1.
Yes.
Most of the time, the cruise speed is just under Mach. It's like a Mach 0.85 or 0.9. And then typically that range between 0.9 and 1 is a hot mess aerodynamically. So what they do is they punch it to get through the Mach barrier. And once they hit on the other side of the Mach barrier, they can kind of then come back to, we'll call it a relatively safe cruise where the turbulence is gone and now they can just fly. But yeah, you're dumping fuel pretty darn fast. And the faster you go past Mach 1, it's ridiculous how much you're losing.
The thing about Super Cruise, the big thing about Super Cruise is you can cruise at that speed above Mach 1 without afterburner. It doesn't require afterburner to get going there. So there's I mean,
most modern jets require afterburner to get to Mach 1 or greater,
especially in a loaded jet. Some of the fourth gen fighters, a lot of them can, under very specific circumstances, can super cruise. And I believe the F-16 is one of them. In a very clean configuration, light loading, in the right air, they can super cruise. But the more modern stuff, they focus on being able to do it regularly under almost any circumstance.
Okay. Sweet.
So, yeah.
Well, there again, go if you need the technical details on like what's on it, what it can do, the power plant, all that stuff. We'll have it, like we'll put together a webpage eventually and a show notes section that will have all that data. Almost all of it's pulled, I think, from the wiki for the most part. So you can go to the wiki on the F-16. I don't want to get it wrong. the F-16. My mind blanked. I'm like, oh no, which one? Anyway, but the F-16 and look at it, because there's a lot of information on what it could do and what it could carry.
And the specs make for great reading. Not so great talking about. Yeah, we could read through it, and
they're awful to talk about.
It gets to be really boring. So we won't do that to you guys.
But, what I noticed is
if it interests you, go read it.
What I noticed was the combat range was 300 nautical miles. The ferry range, when it had like drop tanks and all that stuff, was like 2,300 miles. Which I thought was pretty neat.
Yeah. The ferry range is with all the extra fuel, and it's only one way.
Right. Yeah.
The combat radius is how far you can go and still come back.
Right. Yep. But I just always know how far they can kind of go on the, most. And how far 2,300 nautical miles is, that's pretty much enough to get to the Pacific coast. I'm pretty sure that's about it. That's still pretty darn far.
It's a long ways.
It's halfway around the world.
It's also magnified heavily these days by mid-air refuel.
Yeah, that's true.
So
yep. So we'll call it to the main topic, or let's get to that topic we were going to talk a little bit about. We briefly chatted about it. I, as part of, and that's what I didn't talk about is, so let's talk about like quadcopters, what we do with them. I had kind of started up a self daily challenge, which has fallen to the wayside. It's not really fallen to the wayside. It's just been either raining, and I realize I have not conformal coated or any kind of water protection on my quad. So when it's raining, the grass is wet up until 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. It's hot as all get out. After that, I don't even want to be outside. It's like 100 degrees and sopping wet outside, 100% humidity or 90%. Feels like 120. It's like, no, I'm not gonna go hang out with my quad outside and sweat on my porch. Like, thanks. But I've got a bunch of batteries. I bought it on purpose to do that, because what I want to do is progress from horizontal stabilized mode to flying it in acrobat mode, where I can go fast, I can maneuver it, I can track something, I can go circles around it and still keep focused. I want to be able to do some tricks, not that I really need to do a ton, but that's what I want to get to. That's my goal. And I think you talked about basically the exact same thing. Like, hey, I want to actually get comfortable with this thing so I could use it and not feel like, and at any minute I'm going to lose it.
almost exactly. I find I've got a handful of quads myself, and they're all on the smaller side. But constantly banging up props or cracking a frame or something like that, just because you get in a little over your head. It's if you're mostly used to flying fixed wing and you don't fly the quads very often, it's not your primary focus. They quickly it's a very different skill set. It's a very different skill set, and I was tired of being frustrated with it. So after the last round of doing some repairs with them, I started down the road of really focusing on doing some sim work for the quad. And so I picked up there's a whole bunch of them out there. The one I ended up picking up is called Liftoff, and I've been spending the last whatever days here every day spending 10-15 minutes or more just focusing on getting the controls down and getting comfortable with making the quad do what I want it to do, rather than just kind of hanging on and pointing it in a direction
and hoping
hoping I don't hit anything. Yeah, but to what you're saying, I want to be able to cruise around. I want to be able to chase a fixed wing plane at my field. I want to be able to fly around, and if I've got my goggles on, I want to be able to look around at stuff. I mean, so far the only really thing I've used my quads for is crashing, and I did take it up and look at some damage to my roof after a storm last year, and it prompted me to buy a new roof, so it was really expensive. But
that's an expensive quad.
But it was really expensive. But it did help me realize the extent of the damage that I wouldn't have been able to see, because it was in an area of the roof that wasn't accessible.
Right. So. Yeah. Well, and that's part of the thing. Like, so like, what do we use a quad for as a primary plane hobbyist, right? Like, what you and I tend to fly is we build an airplane out of whatever, and we go fly it. Like, a quadcopter isn't our go-to, So then what's the point of having a quad, right? And you did a great job of kind of summarizing it. I would add to that, just like if you're producing a video, right? Like I'm flying a plane. I want to show you what it's about. Maybe I show you a quick build video. Then we go out and do a thing. Well, part of the story is, well, you want to do a setup shot, right? Well, I want to do an overhead shot of the field, or I want to catch the horizon. I want to catch it as it's maybe taking off from above or something, like maybe just a setting shot. Well, some of the drones like the DJI, I'll call it DJI drones, but basically ones that you can put in the air, say stay there, and it stays there, with a gimbal or something like that. Those are great for setting up these static shots that all you need in your video is for what, like 5 seconds total for the whole video. You need like 5 seconds worth of those shots, but like they're really helpful in establishing part of your story or whatever it is you're putting together for the shot. So they're helpful for that. I want to use it to be able to find my lost plane, because every once in a while I lose one way out there. And I'm like, man, I'm never gonna, I think I missed my line. I should be able to see it if I could be on top. I think it's probably there, but I'm eye level with the stuff that's growing, so I can't see very far without it being obstructed. But if I had a higher view, I think I'd have a chance,
Yeah.
But I don't feel confident taking any of the things I have and flying out across the field and coming back successfully with, not losing that in the drone, in the field.
Because then you're looking for the plane and the quad.
And I'm never going to find the quad. I mean, I have a hard time with like an 8-foot wing in the beans. I'll never find anything else, like forget that. So, looking like, well, so how do we get good enough? Like you did a great thing. Is just go on and grab the sim. I'm with you. I think liftoff is one of my favorites. You don't have to do the gates and the racing, but it's there. And I think the racing teaches you, when you're flying, how to focus, and also how to recover from quick turns and things like that. If you want to do certain tricks, like I want to focus on a point, I want to kind of go around it. Like they have a lot of obstacles that you can do that with. But they also have a couple scenes that are just like construction sites and things like that. So if you're looking to fly through one of the levels of the building and not crash into everything, right? Like you can do it, but you got to learn how, right? And those simulators really give you a good chance at not destroying your quad while learning how to do that.
For me, the racing gates, doing the racing side of it, gives you a real solid focus of, I need to go there. Mm-hmm. So let me figure out how to make the quad go exactly where I want it to go. Whereas when you're doing the free run stuff in any of the maps, that's you're getting the feel for what the quad does. You're flying it around. But if you're coming in on something and you decide, well, that looks a little iffy, maybe I'll just bail out and I'll go out this way instead. Which is in the real life, when you're flying your real quad, that's always a possibility, or almost always.
Like with full scale flying, like you always want to know where your out is. Like if something goes wrong, where am I going to go? You should always have that in your mind. Right? But with the quad, you kind of want to go, this is going south, I got to get out of here.
and the racing on the racing side, when you're doing the racing part, that forces you to learn how to make, even if it's a bad line, that forces you to figure out how to get there and how to make it. Which okay, it's one thing for if you're professionally racing the quads, it's a different thing. But for someone who's just going to go out and do the free run or go fly wherever they want, I think it builds a level of skill of making the quad do exactly what you want it to do. That opens up your world of it's not, I'm not just stuck doing the easy thing, but I can go fly between. If I want to go look down there, I can go fly between those trees because I know how to make it do the thing that I want it to do, rather than go, oh, that's gonna be too hard. I don't want to risk it. It gives you a higher level of confidence.
Yeah, and you have better control of the quad, and that was what I've actually come to. I've probably flown. Sadly, it's been about a week, and I've probably flown maybe 8 days, and I think I've flown 4 of them. It's sadly, I wanted to do more, but and I'll keep at it. You know, I've got like 8 batteries, so that's where you have 8 batteries. You just blow through 8 batteries. Well, that's that's a good hour and a half of flying, and that's part of why I bought that many batteries. Is because what I notice is when I pick up a 3-pack or whatever, well, that's enough to get comfortable, and then you have to wait and go back inside and go charge your batteries, and then 2 hours later, and if you're like me, you squirreled, did something else, and you go, oh right, I wanted to fly the quads again, and then you pull out the 3 batteries and you're like, oh cool, I'm gonna get to this, and then you just get comfortable again, and maybe you're on that last battery when you're actually doing something and you're comfortable with the quad again. One of the things that is, I mean, the first piece is learning throttle control, but it's, if you don't understand how going in the different modes, like horizon mode is really just like, it's going to stay put more or less, unless you tell it to go some other way. Not entirely, but pretty close. But when you start getting into the acrobat
still
mode,
have to fly it.
You still have to fly it. Like you still have to, because it will run into stuff. It'll drift around,
Yeah.
It's not a DJI, so it's not like it's just going to say, you say, go here. And it goes, okay. And it'll just stay there. Like, no, it'll drift, but it'll generally stay relatively close to what you want. You're still controlling the throttle. So you still control altitude. You still have to be on that. But it's easy to kind of keep after a while. But that's a skill right there. Like I'm flying along. I have a hard time getting too close to the grass. I'm probably at about 8 feet is where I'm flying. Sometimes about 5. Maybe 3 if I'm getting a little iffy. Because what happens is when the throttle dips a bit, it comes down, and now I'm right at the grass level, and I'm trying to recover still, and I'm still trying to work that. And that's and the way my quad is set up is it's not big enough or powerful enough to be able to flip over on its own and fly out of the grass. Like it's not a 5-inch quad where it's sitting above the grass; it's in the grass. So mine kind of just gets stuck. So I really have to be conscious of, hey, don't get in the grass, because that'll be the end of your battery for a little bit, and you might you'll probably lose a prop too. It'll come off in the grass somewhere, and you'll be like, oh shoot, I'll never find this now. But yeah, I mean that was the thing is I got to the point where I was flying acro, and I was flying around my house and doing circuits and being comfortable, because I did it with the other, and I realized after about by the second day, I'm like, I'm learning some bad habits if I keep this up. Because the neat thing about acro is, like, when you tilt forward, you just leave it there.
Yeah.
It'll stay there. You have to tilt it back to ease up. So what happens is you kind of set it tilted forward for the forward speed you want, and then you're just kind of driving it around, and you don't have to worry about keeping it held forward to keep going forward and all that. You sort of let it cruise.
Yeah.
Which is nice. I mean, that's it's nice to kind of feel comfortable. And I had one where I flew right through that little drain loop, the loop between the eave and the gutter.
Oh yeah, nice.
I wasn't intending to go quite there. I was planning on cutting the gutter edge like really good, and I got a little too high, and I was like, oh no. And I was like, I think I'm gonna go, and like, nope. And I was looking through the loop, and I went right through it. I'm like, I'm never gonna do that again. I didn't record it. But it was a good run. It was like the last acro run of the day, and it was the last battery, and it was just a good flight. I was like, nice. I'm still trying to get through a whole battery without hitting the grass, But I got to get back to it. I also went. I tested the range. That little flywheel with the little tiny ceramic antenna from the ELRS.
The Firefly.
The Firefly 1S thing. It goes to a half a mile out on the other side of my neighborhood.
Oh wow!
Which isn't easy because the houses are made of lead, and every house is pumping out Wi-Fi signal, right? So, and I got all the way, I got to a certain point, and all of a sudden the signal went from 50% to no. And I'm like, oh no, it cut out. I was like, darn it. Ended up recovering it, but it was fun. I just wanted to see where. What I notice is if I've got clear line of sight between the buildings, I can fly out that general direction. But when I start getting behind a house, the signal cuts significantly.
Makes sense.
I mean, right, and it makes perfect sense. And of course, I'm in the middle of a neighborhood, so that just means I need to go at a pretty high angle if I'm going to fly out, unless I've got to weave between the buildings. So, but it was fun to kind of fly around the neighborhood a little bit and then bring it back. And I don't know if that's something you're looking to kind of do with what where you want to go with your little 4-inch.
Yeah, we've got a field behind my house that I'll fly through once in a while. I haven't done it back there much lately. I have to be real careful because I live in the shadow of a major metro airport.
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't.
Have you thought about flying out, like driving out somewhere where you can fly a little bit more unabashed?
That's usually what I do. I drive out to our local field, where our club flies at, and we fly out there a little bit. But that's just a plain open field, and so there's not a lot of interesting stuff out there to see unless I get out over the trees or anything like that.
Right, or you're trying to go in between the rows, which good luck with that.
Yeah.
With the skill level you and I are at, I think right now, that's really not a good idea.
No. So I'm a little careful with it. I mean, my quads are all, even my largest one is still under 250 grams if I have the right stuff. So I'm not too worried about it. I just can't go too high. It can't go over 200 feet where we're at. So without getting potentially someone complaining.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, so that just means most of the quad flying that you're probably going to do on your own, you'll be fine because you're doing low to the ground maneuvering stuff and not like, hey, let me get an aerial shot of all this stuff.
Well, as you build the skill, right, then you come lower and get more comfortable getting closer to things. Early on, I was wanting to fly it up higher, so I, 3 mistakes high kind of thing that I learned from the fixed wing stuff. But you touched on throttle control earlier, and the further I get with this, it's like the classic. The more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And so the better I get with my throttle control, the more I learn how much more there is to know about it. And I feel like the throttle control is clearly one of those areas of with quad flying, with the acrobatic quads. That's one of those areas that you'll never stop learning on the throttle control. I feel like that's just the area that you can constantly continue to. Anybody who does long range shooting, which is another hobby of mine, the wind calls is the same thing. You can do all the math for the bullet drop, and you can get all your data and know what the bullet's going to do vertically, but horizontally with the wind, figuring out wind calls and what's going to get pushed left or right, how much, and the further out you go, the harder it gets, and I feel like it's the same. Contextually, it's the same as the throttle control, where it's just no matter what, you're never going to be perfect at it. There's always more to learn, and there's always room to get better, no matter how far along you get. Even the best guys in the world at it, they'll probably tell you. I suspect they would tell you that you still need to dial in that throttle control get it better every single time.
Have you found that I'll call it the quad guys, right? Like I go to Josh Bardwell's channel a lot because he teaches a lot about what's going on with them and what's going wrong with them and how to fix that stuff and understand what's happening, because there's a lot more than seems on the surface. So it's always helpful. I always go there, but you're going to places like Rotor Riot or any of the individual guys and watching the racers do the DRL racing and all that stuff, and drone racing, and that's what DRL is. Just watching them do their thing, and they make it look, obviously it's easy and effortless because they've mastered the throttle management skill and thing like to a degree. But you can, every once in a while they'll have one where they're showing their stick movement, and it's tough because I want to watch how they're flying, but then I want to watch their sticks, and it's never quite and
switching back and forth.
Let me go back but watching, you can see they have a general thing, and then they occasionally blip. And and again, where they go full throttle and bring it back down for like not even a split second, but that's to be like, oh, I'm almost hitting the ground. I better level it back out again, or I want to do a maneuver or something. Like, oh, okay, that's how to do those things. So if you are growing and you want to understand how do they keep that quad so level, right? it seems like you keep the throttle. Like, no, you don't keep the throttle. It's almost like 3D aerobatic flying, where you're more blipping the throttle, where you're almost pulsing it rather than doing one constant. Like, you can do it, but it's almost easier to control when you're doing a up and down, like occasional pulse, because the pulse gets it kind of up, and it almost like floats it. It almost like hops it in the air.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the type of flying you're doing, right? If you're doing the freestyle stuff, I think that's definitely there. Yeah, the aesthetic of a power loop just gets me every time. I just love that quick blip up, and then the rollover, and then the straight down. You'll see people diving down, structures and stuff like that. But that aesthetic of coming up real fast, and then rolling over and coming back down just gets me every single time. It's awesome.
I was kind of like the one where they come up on a building, and then they basically come around like basically go in a loop, and then they flatten out against the building. They kind of roll it so it kind of almost hits the building. They blip it just as they're about to hit it, and then they just slide down the building. And of course, and they're like, now keep in mind, the camera's at whatever degree, so your quad is actually not at, it's not facing down. It's actually this way. So when you blip your throttle, you're actually trying to do this. You like pull it away at an angle. So you got to be more careful. Like, oh yeah, you got to think in a different kind of fashion. And I know it's one of those things, just like some of the plane flying, when you become familiar and comfortable with plane flying, a lot of the things that were really difficult and you had to think hard about, and it's like anything, it becomes like, oh, I don't have to think about it. My brain just does it because I'm there. I'm already some of it you have to but they're always like, yeah, when you're thinking of a new trick and you're trying to plan out a new thing you want to do, how do I get this visually? Because it's really helpful to grab your quad and point your camera in the way you want the shot to go and watch the quad move and understand, oh, if I'm going to do this, I actually have to, it's not a straight rotate. It's a rotate and tilt forward or tilt back. And it's like all that kind of maneuver. It's like, okay, cool. That kind of helps more understand, like when you're coming around a bend, when you're turning, it's not just let me yaw left, right? Like I don't come around the bend of a house and turn to the left. I turn to the left, I roll to the left a bit, I pull up on the throttle, I rotate forward a little, or rotate back a little bit as I, like I'm kind of sliding around the turn, almost like as a toboggan bank. Think of more of with bobsled people, I got to do this like a bobsled. So how am I going to set my quad blades up so that I can bobsled it well?
A bobsled without the track.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. No track. The track is whatever you make it. Right.
And that's one of the things that still gets me is maintaining the same altitude coming through a turn like that, because I always end up keeping with throttle control, right? I keep the throttle up, so as the quad comes back, as it tips back a little bit, you have more thrust going upward. So every time I'll climb, just like everybody else, of course. And that's something I'm working on currently, is trying to maintain a consistent altitude while coming in and out of maneuvers. To balance, to get that throttle control dialed in.
Yeah, if you're following, I guess if you're in the simulator, you're probably doing more like the gate following stuff, where it's going to be a left and a right and a left and a up and a down. You know what I mean? Whereas for me, my circuit is, because I'm outside and it's real life, and I don't have too many holes to fly through. The ones I have are really kind of dangerous to get to at my skill level. I imagine like going over the car and in through the porch and out, the next column line, like that'll probably come maybe. But right now that's way past my skill range, right? Like I'll be lucky if I'm zooming around the house and doing a loop and not getting caught on something, right? So like, okay, so we're doing a circuit and not doing a loop. But as I'm coming around, like I always do, like I'm going one way and it's like a racetrack. So I'm going just left. I get really good at left, and then I go, oh shoot, I have to turn right. Like, how do I do that?
NASCAR.
It's not NASCAR, right? So I've always incorporated in each one of my loops, like, hey, you're going to go left around the house. Like you're going to do a clockwise circuit, but when you get to the tree in the front yard, you're going to rotate around it to the right. And then eventually I'm going to turn that into, you're going to do, I don't know what it's called, like
just a figure eight. Right? One loop around the house and one loop around the tree.
One loop around the tree the other way, so I can get used to doing the other way too. But part of that is eventually I'm going to have it so that the camera is always facing the tree as I come around it, so I can get used to that kind of shot, because that's the kind of shot I want to be able to pull off with an airplane. So if I'm tracking an airplane that somebody's flying and I want to kind of show off what they've done, I want to come around the front of that plane. And it'll be a little bit different, but if I can rotate around it and still keep the camera kind of centered, that will be, I think, the kind of shot that I'm aiming for. So in my mind, as I learn, I'm trying to think, well, what maneuvers do I want to learn that I think will be helpful in the missions I want these quads to go fly? Like I'll probably end up having a bigger quad, but I find and I think this is where the reviews were dead on. Like I've flown 5-inch quads and I'm not but well enough to understand how they fly, right? And simming and the different, you can pick different size and stuff. This little, it's a 1S. This thing, these blades aren't any bigger than the ones that are on the Easy Packs. Like they're not bigger in diameter. They're just spinning faster. This thing flies, I feel very outdoors. It flies as well in the wind as any 5-inch quad I was flying. So
very cool.
I'm really impressed. Again, for the size, most of the time when they're that size, they can't handle the wind. Like they're gonna get blown around. And it does every once in a while in a stiff breeze, you can feel it. But what I appreciate about it is it's small, it's compact, it's easy to bring around, but I feel like what I'm learning there is translatable to a larger quad. Though it may have more mass, it'll also have more power. So I think it'll fly about the same.
Right.
So I'm excited to see, so that way when I'm bringing a 5-inch quad out to film, a new plane coming around, like I feel like that'll actually be, like Joe doing his plane or something like that.
Yeah. Well, come on up and film CDEC à l'Orange 2.1.
Man, why you got to tempt me like that? It's only like a 10-hour drive, right?
No, it's not. It's not so bad.
It's not so bad. Nice. Well, and that's the other thing is, are you aiming to keep it under 250 grams? Or are you looking to do like, I'm going to have a small one for one kind of thing? Do you want to get into the bigger quads or?
So for now, eventually I probably will. For now, I'm trying to keep it under 250 just for the reason of keeping it around the house and not having any additional headaches with regulations. Right. Especially given the fact that I live so close to a major airport.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. That's probably I did it also because if I do end up hitting something by accident, because I'm in a neighborhood like I'm not going to do any serious damage. I'm going to be like, oh, geez, I'm really sorry. Let me buff that out for you.
and I did pick up a tiny whoop just to fly around the house too. Mm-hmm. I'll run laps around the inside of our house with the tiny whip sometimes too.
Yeah, I ended up buying that. Go ahead.
Dog hates it. The dog hates it.
Of course it does. Yeah. Was that angry little bee? Stop it. All right. Nice. Anything you want to add to that whole? Anything I forgot we wanted to talk about? And
no. I will. You mentioned Bardwell. Bardwell's kind of my go-to. For Joshua Bardwell for quad stuff. I just like his approach, the way he does his channel. I enjoy watching his stuff, even just in general. It's nice. It's fun to watch. And Liftoff has a level that's his space around his house. Yeah, which is funny.
I was like, so what's cool is you can watch his videos, and then try to reproduce what he's done while he's flying around, and you're like, man, that's harder than it looks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and you mentioned one other thing. I'll say that in the Sims, I'm finding I'm doing a mix, probably a 60-40 mix of just free flight around stuff and just trying to follow paths in free flight versus trying to follow some of the gates in the racing stuff. I find I can't do too much of the racing stuff because of my own competitive nature, that I'm trying to beat the other quads in the race rather than learn. So I do it a little bit, but I definitely do more for free flight even though I think there's definitely some value in doing the actual racing side of it.
Well, I think like when we both, you and I have both been to Flight Fest and put our stuff in combats, what you find is if you're in combat and you're trying to do a thing, you focus on it harder. I don't know, you there's a certain competitive nature that comes out that makes you push yourself further than you would if you didn't have to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
Like there's certain things I wouldn't have done with my Spitfire. I wouldn't have tried. Like I'm going to do this, and it's like S maneuver. All of a sudden, I'm practically hammerhead stalling it in midair, trying to turn 180 quick. Yeah, like this is that maneuver they talk about in combat. Like holy God, I just did that. But yeah, like I wouldn't do that in the field and flying a lazy circuit around the field. Or like what else am I here for? You know. At some point, I'm going to get to the point, I think, other than testing new planes, is going to be like, if I'm not there with somebody to do pseudo dogfights and other challenges that we might have, I might find part of this hobby kind of being a little boring. Like, I don't know that I want to just bring the tried old true and do circuits around a field, other than I like flying. But at some point, I feel like that's going to start getting old and boring.
I will say that if I'm not, like if there's not other people flying around me, if I'm just the only one in the air, even with fixed wing, I fly incredibly recklessly. I don't want to.
What's the point otherwise, right?
For the most part, I don't want to be precious about my planes. I want to be it's gotta stay entertaining for me, and part of that is pushing them to the limit. That's why I like the flight test stuff, because the price of a failure in a maneuver is a couple sheets of foam board,
right? In an afternoon.
One of the things I love about the Sea Duck, and especially this version 2 of my Sea Duck à l'Orange with the bigger motors, is the flat spin. Flat spins crack me up every time.
Yeah.
I just and this one with these, with more thrust on tap, this thing will flat spin even greater. And I'll put some video up of the flat spin on the maiden flight of the Duck.
Okay.
Of Duck 2.0. It was 2.0. Now it's 2.1 after getting damaged.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that then. Please put it up.
I gotta learn how to edit it first. It's weird.
Okay. I believe it. I've got so we'll have a link to. I've got a link to your Duck à l'Orange, the Friday Night Combat.
Cool.
So I'll have a link there. While you're there, look out for that new video that Brian will be putting up eventually.
Check the Discord. I'll post when it's available. I will post a link in the Discord.
Okay, good. We'll make sure to highlight that. Although if you're putting it in the general stuff, it'll probably get lost awful quick because we have so much activity in there some days, which is wonderful. So if you haven't, I'm going to start. If you don't mind, Brian, if this is about if we've covered everything, I'm going to start going through the end of this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good place to stop.
Okay, good. Hey, if you haven't, you can join Brian and I and Joe. And all the other listeners who've joined up, as well as the other Yahoos who love this hobby and have enjoyed being part of this stuff, and either being part of the build or listening to the podcast, or they just heard it from a friend. Join us on our Discord. We'll put a link in the doobly-doo. You can also, if you have a question or a comment, or you want to write up a history and join us on a podcast, if you want to join us, or you could record it at home and send it to us, or just send your favorite plane information over to us to possibly cover. You can reach Joe at aviationrcnoob.com, or you reach me at matthew@aviationrcnoob.com, or you can send it to both of us. And I always think that's the best way. Then we both see it and we have both a chance of looking at it. Is aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Let's see. We have a website at aviationrcnoob.com. I think we cover that. Let's see. I want to thank all of our patrons who help keep the lights on. I want to thank all of our listeners who've been trudging through 82-hour episodes. So I appreciate your your diligence, and you keep with us, and I'm really excited. Remember, we're still working on all the ridiculous projects that we've been doing, which is, we have a whole channel dedicated to what are we going to do for next year's Flight Fest. Flight Fest next year is the 10th anniversary. I feel like Joe and I both feel, I think, that we owe Flight Fest. They are one of the big reasons why we've had a chance at even enjoying this hobby, because we would never even thought to get in if it weren't for how approachable they make it. So that's usually kind of why we highlight their stuff. So Flight Fest next year, we're going to be doing some sort of ridiculous big build, probably. I think during this year, I'm going to rebuild our giant new Wonder, so that we have one of those at Flight Fest next year, just because we want to have it flying around, because we love it. But we also want to have a fun big build. There's been a lot of different ideas. Another one of the ideas that's been floated, again, we're going to start putting together a poll probably in the next couple episodes here, and we'll have it going for a little bit, because we want some good feedback from you. One of the ideas is dinosaurs. Just everybody make dinosaurs that fly, and I had a picture of a T-Rex with wings, which that would be pretty fun. I'm like, well, might be a little limited, but there's some ideas out there. We could maybe have a bunch of plesiosauruses and Loch Ness monsters that fly.
I want to see somebody pull up a flying stegosaurus. I think that I'd be impressed.
That's it, right? That's what I'm thinking too. And another idea that somebody had come out with, and I don't think we talked about, was maybe Joe and I build a giant sea duck, like a 400% sea duck or some ridiculous junk. And then everybody builds an AP sea duck, Air Pirates Quack. It's like a single engine little boat plane, and you put it on a tow strip, and we tow all y'all up as a big duck and all its little ducklings, all its quacks, and we all run up. And I hope everybody paints theirs very differently, because it's going to be a hot mess when I release that tow rope. That was one of the other ideas that I thought was pretty funny, because we were like, oh, it would be cool to have a big plane, and then that big plane tows up a bunch of us, and I'm like, yeah, that would be pretty ridiculous.
It's a long tow rope.
Yeah, and everybody's like, the sea duck, because we were talking about the sea duck. And I'm about it, because look, the sea duck is a great plane, so having a giant one around isn't a bad idea. But then I'm like, oh my gosh, what would you tow behind it? And I'm like, oh, I know, the Quack, the AP Quack. It's adorable. It's a single engine high little boat plane.
and then you got to open the after you release everybody, then you got to open the door on the back of the sea duck and dump out a bunch of rubber duckies all over the runway.
With parachutes.
With parachute.
Yeah, of course.
Or not, depending on the mood you're in.
Whoa. What do you mean, or not? There's no or not.
They bounce.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing, is that at that point we probably lightweight PLA print a bunch of hollow sea ducks, and then put a bunch of parachutes. Look, all these ideas are flying around. So we got that. We got those two there. We've got like under the sea theme, which is all sorts of fishy stuff. Jellyfish.
I like that one. I do like that one.
Yeah, it's flying turtle, all sorts of shark, that kind of junk.
Manta rays, I think.
Manta rays, all that. So all of those variety, and of course we would, as part of any of these there's a community component where everybody basically has builds a variant of this community plane, and everybody brings that, and then we all fly in one big kind of mess, or we hand it up to combat, or we all string it together, and the big plane takes all the little planes up into combat and releases the hounds, and then of course I've got the idea of the disc shooter plane, where everybody has a disc in the disc shooter plane, and I start releasing planes one out of the next after it gets up in combat, and we just start releasing a horde of these little disc flying craft. So
that could work.
My thought is they would be like, if we made it in the STEM size, we could have the STEM tents building them, and the kids putting their little STEM things, and they just put it in the chute in the top, and then we're like, hey, go, and then they get to fly in combat and see how it holds up. just ideas. These are all the ideas we have rolling around. There's a lot more to come. If you've got any, send them. We want to hear it.
The hardest part will be picking one.
That really
because they're all so good.
I know.
They all
I have
great potential.
I have a feeling whatever one we pick, I'm probably going to have one of those other ones is going to be my little personal pet project that I do anyway. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Nice.
But yeah, no, Brian, thank you so much for joining me today and joining. You know, I know Joe couldn't really be here, but for a little bit. So I appreciate you could kind of fill in for Joe's role while he was unavailable, and honestly doing a great job with the history. Once again, I appreciate it so much.
I have fun with the history. I don't fill in for Joe so well, so I like it when all three of us are here. So
yeah, I'm glad
hopefully we'll do some more.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I hope so too. I'm glad he was able to come on for a little bit and kind of tell us
for sure.
What he was up to. All right, well, I think that's about it. We're going to wrap it up and let you guys go on with the rest of your day. So thanks so much. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Oh man, I just realized I'm gonna have to intro and close it out. Yikes.
Wow, yeah, because that's too complicated for me.
All right, eventually there's a stop button. I don't know where that is. And there we go. That's stop the recording.
Stop, Craig. Now should I stop Audacity?
I don't know what I'm supposed to do with the recording though.